What's up, everybody? Are we live? Are we doing this?
You bet your bottom. Slap happy butt smacking deal you got there, sir.
What's up, Internet? We're here to read a book. It's
You've heard
Classification
of it?
Struggles. You might have heard of it. Oh, you mean a book?
Reading a book. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I know right off the bat. I'll shut up.
We're going to read a book. Heard of it? What book? It doesn't matter. I mean books. Have you heard of books? Well, this one is Classification Struggles by Pierre Bourdieu. Once upon a time, many months ago, I got started trying to read this book on stream, and I made it a little far, but not far enough. Now we're just starting over because it's kind of like a TV show. You watch a few episodes and then you're like, oh, I want to binge this, and I can't binge it now, and so I'm going to come back to it, and then, or because you want to watch it with somebody, even better. And then by the time you're coming back to it, you're like, I just want to start from the beginning, and that's exactly what we're doing, is just starting back from the beginning. And so, or if you'll just pull up the front page, we'll get to it. We don't have as long as usual because I was late to the game and it took a little while to get set up, but we're gonna find our flow here, and go ahead and say hi if you're in the chat. If you're just dropping by, just say hi. But also, if you're here to get a little bit of a new voice injected into you, no better way to start than right here.
And no microchips in any of our injections.
None, or at least very few.
Yeah, that's what I'm told.
Oh no, what did I just do? Okay. Oh no, I fucked up everything, man. Oh no. It's just showing you. It's just showing your face. The reading is gone.
Oh,
But
great.
great. Why did this happen like this? Let's just start reading from the top. Oh no. The screen share thing, man. I swear to God.
They don't make it easy.
mm. Here, can you end the
Little
screen
Miss
share?
Pumpkin. Yeah, and do it again.
Yeah, and then do it again.
Okay.
What? See, this is weird.
Share.
It's got me like, why are you full sized?
And we are choosing which one
This
of
was a problem
these? I think this
the other
one.
day too.
Si es correcto.
Okay, yep, that's the trick. Now we're back.
Beautiful.
Wonderful. I'll start from the top here. Just read a couple paragraphs and then pass it over. All I want to say to folks is, if you know nothing about Pierre Bourdieu, that's good, because really this is just a lecture, and so it's not like we're reading his writing. We're reading a public talk that he gave. This happened on the 28th of April, 1982, and it begins. I have given the course of lectures that I am going to teach over the next few years the title, A Course of Lectures on General Sociology. This might sound distinctly pretentious if we emphasize the universal nature of general sociology, yet extremely modest if we draw attention to the course as a series of lectures. The very notion of teaching a course, as I would define it in sociological terms, necessarily implies a modicum of modesty. My aim might best be understood as a study of my own research. I am obviously not the best placed person to lecture on what I do, because there is, it seems to me, a certain contradiction between teaching and research, between the complex and subjective nature of research and the simplification demanded by the very nature of a taught course. Thus, what I propose to offer will not be a course in the strict sense of the term, yet it will be a course in the more modest sense of the term. In fact, to explain more clearly the title that I have chosen, I would call it an axiomatic view of my own research, showing the articulation between the fundamental concepts and the structure of relations that connects these concepts. Basically, I have taken the liberty of using the excuse of teaching a course, in the ordinary social sense of the word, in order to do something that I would not normally risk undertaking. That is, attempt to present the major lines of force of my whole research enterprise. I love how he tries to be humble when he's like the most famous dude doing sociology at the time, and then this is like the most distinguished position he could have, and then he's like, it'll be humble in the sense of course, I'm also going to try to do something that I've never tried to do before. I'm going to actually take on, you know what I mean? He's like, it's the biggest humble brag paragraph you could possibly open with.
Yes, love it.
Over the next few years, I shall explore a certain number of key concepts, both in terms of their conceptual mechanisms and in terms of their technical function for research. I shall take the notion of a field and, on the one hand, situate this notion in relation to the notion of a material field, and on the other hand, examine the relationship between the material field and the field defined as a site of conflict. Then I shall go on to examine the relationship between the notion of field and the notion of habitus, which will lead me to investigate what motivates and determines practices. More specifically, I shall attempt to explain what seems to me to be the logic of action that emerges from the articulation of the notion of field with the notion of habitus. And finally, I shall try to show the relations between different types of field and different types of capital. These are only the chapter headings, but I wanted to mention them in order to provide the framework for my reflections this year on something that seems to me to be an essential precondition for any attempt to establish a theory in the social sciences. That is, the relation between the scientific subject and his or her object, and more precisely, the relation between the scientific subject as subjective intelligence and the object of his or her studies, which is a set of subjects in action. So you could almost call this a prolegomena to any future social science work, right? That's what he's saying. And, these are just broad headers and a sort of outline of the direction that we're going to be going, but he kind of lays it all out right there. And I'll just summarize all of it by saying, we're going to be getting into field analysis. And if it just sounded like he was saying field this, field that, and you're kind of trying to track that, eventually we'll get on the whiteboard and we'll kind of draw out the relations and we'll go more in depth together. But right now we're doing a little bit more of a read through, and we'll come back, go a little bit deeper into this, as shall he. He'll also be going deeper into this. I'll take this last paragraph and then pass it over to you, Bauer.
Sure.
In order to formulate these questions without being unnecessarily theoretical, I propose to examine one of the procedures fundamental to all the social sciences, the operation of classification. Any social science that needs to use statistical analysis and draw on it in order to make comparisons between different constructed classes is obliged to divide the populations that are its objects into classes, and I intend to examine this procedure by comparing it to what we find in the natural sciences, for example, in biology, zoology, or botany, and by trying to determine more precisely the relations between the classifications produced by scholars and the conditions that led them to produce these classifications, and the classifications that social agents put into practice in their everyday lives, right? Is it the same simple kind of description? Probably not, and we'll find out why.
Before I start reading, I'm seeing this as kind of a summary of all those other things that you had me read. Outline of a Theory of Practice, Pascalian Meditations, and in other words, like that last paragraph seems to be really introducing his idea, his reluctance of kind of scholastic reasoning. And what's the chapter 1 of Outline of a Theory of Process is called The Objective Limits of Objectivism. And I'm guessing he's really coming for that dialectic of enlightenment kind of thing, that critique of instrumental reason.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, when he's saying fields, like more broadly, is he pointing to like fields of power, which is another concept of his, or even other types of fields as well?
Yeah, it does seem like he, in laying out in that previous paragraph, the differences between the notion of the field, the situation of that field in relation to the notion of a material field. So he's saying there's a difference between field and material field. And then he's talking about the difference between those two notions and the relationship between them. And then he wants to talk about thinking about the field as a site of conflict. I think that at the point that we're talking about it as a site of conflict, we're talking about it as having something to do with power for sure. But then he wants to talk about the different kinds of capital. And he's going to
social, symbolic, cultural, the main ones. Yeah.
Right. Mainly because he's going to take for granted that there is a global capitalist mode of production, but that anywhere, any of the fields that he's most interested in are the ones that think themselves to be doing something different than the reproduction of economic capital. Especially, this is going to be true with non-government organizations, nonprofits, as well as government bureaucracies, as well as academia, as well as art. He often goes to art as the sort of the what's easiest to go after, but everything he says about art is going to apply to politicians and what they're doing. And so, yeah, power is here, and it operates according to the logics of capital, but then people think it's not. And then it's that disavowal that makes it the symbolic capital thing. You get symbolic capital by saying that you're doing it because of some nonprofit related motive. Right? Like
in the same way, you'll always have to shut me down for never saying Hegel throughout this whole thing. Even in my previous readings of Bourdieu, you're going to have to shut me down the whole time for not bringing up ideology, because of course that runs through the veins of this. It's following that ideology critique kind of history. Yeah, oh, definitely. Good shit here.
Ideology, actually, power and ideology are a couple of words he rarely uses, but that's because he's surrounded by people who are, it's like Althusser and Foucault are like down the hall. And so it's like he's going to use his own words. And his approach, I do think, is different, but of course it's very complementary. And he is also swimming in the same sort of waters there. Yeah. Okay. All right. Teaching research, take it away. I'm going to eat some granola while I listen to you serenade me.
Teaching research. I would like to take advantage of the fact that this is my first lecture in order to attempt a captatio benevolentiae as classical. Well, I'm going to guess that's like a benevolence, so goodness, captivating goodness, capturing goodness. Anyway, as classical orators used to call it, to try to justify my approach in advance. I don't know if the approach that I propose to follow is ordinary or extraordinary, but it is the only way that I can operate. Although I readily admit that a lecture is never more than a teaching exercise, I shall endeavor to make mine as unlike a taught course as possible. I hope to be able to neutralize the neutralization effect that teaching almost inevitably engenders. For even when called direction of research, teaching creates something of a fiction, an artifact. We work in a vacuum, for we present the results of our research rather than explain our methods of research. I cannot escape the general rule, if only because of the structure of the space within which I am speaking and the diversity of my audience. But as far as I can, within the limits of the freedom allowed to me as a social agent, I would like to neutralize these effects by anticipating them in two ways. On the one hand, by drawing on concrete examples, that is, my experience as a scholar and the research that I am engaged in, or on social experiences directly accessible to the majority of my audience. And on the other hand, by counting on the complicity of my audience. I shall, of course, be obliged to conduct a monologue. This is the very logic of our situation here, but I would like to encourage a form of dialogue. For example, by way of questions put to me either orally at the end of a lecture or in writing at the start of the next lecture, so that I can, wherever possible, clear up misunderstandings and reply to objections or questions, or say that I am unable to answer the question, which will no doubt often be the case. This is not a mere rhetorical flourish. I really would welcome any kind of feedback, whether in conversation at the end of the lecture if you feel so bold, or in the form of written notes for those less brave. but I wish. Next paragraph. This concern to avoid following the logic of the taught course as far as I can will have an impact on the rhetorical style of my discourse. The paradigm of the lecture is the aggregation lecture, which I have analyzed elsewhere in sociological terms, and which I wish to avoid. There's a footnote. I don't have it on this page. That's fine. It is an exercise designed to be impregnable. The professor who delivers it is quite unassailable. Engaging in research is quite the contrary, for rather than taking every possible precaution, it implies laying oneself bare with all one's weak points and insecure arguments. Since scientific progress by definition requires us to lower our guard and prepare to be criticized. Breaking with French-style teaching will lead me to use a different mode of expression, sometimes hesitant or pedestrian, one that experts in French rhetoric might call laborious, long-winded, or cumbersome. I shall not hesitate to be pedestrian when the situation calls for it, although I shall not do so on purpose. French-style teaching insists so much on wit, elegance, distinction, and lightness of touch that it accustoms its audience to be satisfied with arguments that gloss over the truth, particularly social truths, as long as it produces a cozy feeling of shared intelligence and equal intellect. Both speaker and listener enjoy a feeling of mutual understanding, and both feel that they are colleagues collaborating in a significant intellectual event. I'm inclined to go on a kind of pedagogy tangent as a teacher related to some of that and how it could very much be applied to pedagogy in general, but I will continue. Next paragraph. In scholarly research, as I understand it, we have to be prepared quite often to feel foolish, incapable, idiotic even. I shall return to the word idiotic, which has considerable social importance. The best kind of philosophy teaches us to open ourselves up completely and adopt a stance of absolute ignorance. Many theses and treatises hope to impress by claiming to do this. I know that I do not know, for example. But few scholars actually put this into practice. In sociology, this virtue of ignorance, this learned ignorance, as Nicholas of Cusa called it, is especially important if we wish to investigate the most basic topics, as I shall do today, in questioning, for instance, the notion of law, of the right, and the just. For example, what is the law? What do we mean when we refer to someone as doing something in the name of the law, etc.? And the notion of nomination, for example, what does the word nomination mean in the kind of sentence that we read casually every day, but which ought to make us stop and think, such as the President of the Republic has nominated one of his friends director of the Banque de France. This laborious process of argumentation, the very antithesis of the elegant style as defined by classical and scholarly tradition, will sometimes be thrust upon me, but will almost always be intentional. And since I am in a position of authority here, will have to be accepted by my audience. I can't help but think that there's a thread of, this is personal comments, of bracketing going through there in a kind of sociological framework. And he's anticipating that people will not respect the fact that not only is he doing that, but that it ought to be done to even accomplish anything beyond the dominant narratives.
100%. He's always very self-aware, right? Maybe to a fault, but I get some kind of enjoyment from it, and it comes through a lot in his lectures. You know, he's surrounded by people who are doing deconstruction. He's surrounded by people who are saying, like Foucault, oh, I can just do this, and there is no subject, there is no author. And Bourdieu's like, it's not true, man. You can't do that. You know, I'll take it away. In the material that I'm about to discuss, I freely admit that my conclusions are only provisional, some more, some less. However, they seem to me to matter less than a certain manner of thinking. I shall invoke the example of a book by Benveniste, Dictionary of Indo-European Concepts in Society, which was the end product of several years of lectures at the College de France, and for me is the epitome of everything that this institution does best. Of course, I find this book admirable for the conclusions it reaches, but also for the mode of thinking it uses. You can read it in any order, or even start at the end, for the structure of the book does not reflect the sequence of the lectures. The order is unimportant, but in each of its fragments we find the same modus operandi at work. Very, very cool. Like, this is very cool, especially at that time. People wanted this nonlinear approach. And that's why Deleuze and Guattari say that in A Thousand Plateaus, the plateaus are written to be read in any order. And so it's also what Benveniste had done in his Dictionary of Indo-European Concepts and Society, which I instantly want to go binge. And I might just listen to it later while I'm doing some weeding here on the farm. Anyway.
I'm even just thinking of how much I tend to love like essay anthologies. I know it's kind of a more moderate version of this, but there's so much to be gained from, instead of throwing oneself into like an entire text by Frederick Jameson, for example, like read a collection of essay anthologies. It's a way of kind of doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the things I did with when I didn't really know where to start with G.K. Chesterton. I did that, and it's just like it's always and by the way, that's a very this year kind of thing for me, because I've always put off reading him, and Zizek has always engaged with him, and I've always wondered what's going on there. Why does Zizek engage with him? And then I just was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to a bunch of essays on Audible while working, and it was like, oh, he's just a delight. Like, he's just like he's just got a delightful mind. I really am enjoying this, and then because whoever sort of remixed that collection, like, I felt like the person who put it together was like a DJ. They included snippets from some of his main books, and like it instantly sent me down this rabbit hole. And then I don't know how I found the time, but like, a month later I'd done like 7 of his books, and I was like, I've been doing other stuff too. I somehow found the time for like 7 of his books, but it can be a real portal in if you just kind of do that, essay approach. Totally. I did, by the way, just download Dictionary of Indo-European Concepts and Society, and I've got it queued up to listen to later, because I was like, let's just do it. So I've always been curious about Benveniste. So it's got a foreword by Agamben. That's pretty cool.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Once this has been assimilated by the reader, it becomes a tool which they can then apply to objects of study that Benveniste unfortunately did not address, and continue the book themselves. The goal of the ideal course of lectures is, I think, to occasionally transmit what we tend commonly to call a method, although we overwork this word so much that we tend to forget what it signifies. It is not a dogma or a thesis. There was a time when philosophers promulgated theses, but that is not my style. My aim is to articulate modes or styles of thinking that we may otherwise assimilate without being consciously aware of the process, by taking you through the simple experience of seeing them at work with all their imperfections. You were talking about how there's a rant, or like you're feeling inspired to kind of go off about pedagogy. I think we should at some point in maybe in our concluding thoughts. But I'll just say, I think the biggest reason I resonated so much with this when I was binging it a couple years ago was because not just the intersection of Marx and Heidegger, as well as all these other kind of things that were coalescing in his work, but his actual idea of like this like non-linear sort of performed method that sort of inseminates the audience with like this new kind of mode like that. I was like, I wanted to do that. I felt like I felt like I was grasping in the dark, trying to find a way of doing it. And then here I discovered, oh, he's doing it. And he's also self-aware that he's doing it. And he's telling his audience, I'm doing this. He says, you see the strategy underlying
There's a power in kind of naming it. Sorry, go ahead.
There is a power to kind of naming it, yeah. He says, you see the strategy underlying my argument. I am asking you to accept in advance all the flaws in my argument and even believe that they are intentional. which will certainly not always be the case. If I had wished to follow a fashionable line of argument for anything that could be argued in an ethereal, or let us say, Parisian way, I could have held forth at length on the notion of the sketch. I would have said that I'm going to draw sketches, I'm going to be sketchy, and so on. However, I shall not structure things in this way, because this would dematerialize something that is undeniably real and true. He's taking pot shots here at Lacan and Derrida and everyone else in Paris who was getting off a little too much on being punny and just being wordy and having fun with it. And he's like, yeah, I can do it. It's fun, but let's keep it real, guys. I propose to close this preamble with one last remark. I intend to approach one of the most fundamental exercises of research, that is, nomination or classification. But I shall do so in order to find a roundabout way of attacking a fundamental problem for sociologists, that of social class. There is a pedagogical contradiction here, but for my demonstration to function properly, you will have to try to forget my underlying intention, which is to attempt, in your company, to solve the problem of social classification. And yet at the same time recognize my hidden agenda so that you understand what it is I am looking for. In fact, I would like to encourage you to practice ignorance and engage in learning at one and the same time. I'll read this last one here. There are numerous treatises on the social classes, and if any among you are disappointed with my teaching, I can offer some excellent bibliographies on the problem. What we are lacking, it seems to me, is research that aims, if not to solve the problem, as people rather pretentiously claim to do, at least to reformulate it so that at the end of the day we are no longer certain of what we thought we knew at the outset. If I may invoke another late great thinker, or master, it has to be Wittgenstein. We need this type of thinker, who makes us unlearn everything that we know or think we know, and who makes us realize, when confronted with an issue like that of social class, that we know nothing, or very little, although any sociologist worthy of the name is capable of delivering a dazzling course of lectures on the social classes.
Any drop of Wittgenstein is great, but I have to say that's such a good reference to him in this kind of vague way of like his overall project and the consequences of his work. And what I see this pointing at, I'm curious what your thoughts are, is the thing about Wittgenstein I don't think gets named enough, speaking of naming things that ought to be, is like the dude had to literally become the absolute world dominating expert in the field of, let's just say, analytic philosophy,
Right.
kind of at the grounds of the linguistic term, in order to then be able to go against his own work that he had understood so clearly. And there's kind of a beauty in his story as an individual, but a fear that I have of like, you mean to tell me that have that much of an impact on the I don't know, intellectual landscape, you have to first be an expert in the thing, like a world dominating expert, before anyone, let alone yourself, being able to kind of tear it down and anyone take you seriously in doing so. And that's kind of the thing that's so sad and dark. What an example of how much this dude had to go against the current. First, he had to be the preeminent expert on an entire series of multiple fields in the world, coming almost out of obscurity into the field, let alone his very rich and wealthy kind of weird ass background and teaching and abusing children in the countryside with elementary students. Such a funny biography. But yeah, like it wasn't possible.
Like,
and it wouldn't have been
like,
taken so
like,
seriously had he
like,
not kind of
like
gotten
smacking them with a ruler. We're not molesting.
Yeah, literally.
Like smacking them with a rular. Let's just, it's.
Oh, I said abusing. I should have said beating.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I think corporeal punishment should be brought back. So I think he was ahead of his time. But keep going. Yeah.
But a good poor choice of words on my part leaves too much open for the imagination.
Right. I didn't want.
This guy had to first. Yeah, he had to get. I mean, all these people, particularly his main patron, Bertrand Russell, to like literally desperately call after him, like some kind of deep, sexy love affair. I need you in my life. You're my romantic muse. I will entice you to come over to England and grant the world with your gifts, and I'll give you all this space. And in the beginning, of course, Wittgenstein is giving him everything that he wants and more, surpassing all of the limits that Russell had continually come up against. And then all of a sudden, in a totally kind of traitorous, uh, like complete, like backstabbing moment. That wasn't his intention, but it was just years later he published his own book that detested and disproved everything from his book that became the worship of the Russellian circles.
Yeah.
And oh my
Yeah.
God, it's a perfect kind of lineage, but sad to know, like in a sense, that almost has to go that way, you know?
But what's kind of fascinating about the Wittgenstein story is that Heidegger is such a correlate, and so there's this fork in the path of philosophy after Kant in Frege
hmm
and Husserl.
hmm
And then both of them are interested in similar problems, but coming at them in different ways. And they both talk to each other and are aware of each other's work. So analytic philosophy, the father of analytic philosophy, Frege, in conversation with the father of 20th century continental philosophy, because of course, Hegel's a big deal, but we're talking 20th century. And so here's Husserl. And then their two proteges being Russell and Heidegger. Never again do they talk to each other, take each other seriously,
Mm-mm.
right?
hmm
And basically Russell, he becomes like the sort of launch pad for Wittgenstein, who basically turns that entire branch inside out and totally messes them up. And it's a big part of the reason analytic philosophers don't want to have to do any history of analytic philosophy. Like they want to just
hmm
focus on a problem, because if they were to
Yep.
examine their own history, that they really have to sit with the Tractatus and then the philosophical
Yep.
investigations, and they don't want to have to
hmm
do that because Wittgenstein's an
And
embarrassing
Whitehead,
moment.
another person they try to sweep under the
Right,
rug too. Well,
right,
they draw on his early works, but they
right.
like to pretend, just like Wittgenstein, that he doesn't exist after a certain time period. Like how convenient. Yes, exactly.
But then Heidegger, for it in very different ways, becomes also embarrassing to revisit for all the people he influences, right? For political reasons,
Mm-hmm.
but also because he goes from being the most skeptical, critical guy in the world to then being like this pastoral prophet, poet guy, which is like the break between early and late Heidegger is pronounced. And I think it's important to recognize it because it is marked by 3 to 5 months in a psych ward. uh, there is
Literally, yeah.
there
People
is a
don't talk about
very
it. Yeah.
no, they don't. There's a big difference between critical Heidegger, sellout Heidegger, and post psych ward Heidegger, and like that's how I
Mm.
periodize him, and that's not how anybody in the field, as far as I know, periodizes him. But you heard it here first, folks. But basically, for those reasons, he becomes difficult to go back to, and so you have analytic and continental philosophy, both for their own reasons, not really wanting to tarry with the person who really sort of sublates their field because
hmm
they each take it in a weird direction.
hmm
Weird by the values or aims of the field itself.
As the resident Hegelian, you can shit on whenever you want to. I often think this is part of the delusion that I see is so embarrassing on behalf of people like Pippin and Brandom and that whole kind of analytical side or neo post analytical, whatever they want to call themselves, of drawing from Hegel. I'm just like, oh, yeah, I don't know where you're headed. What's the point of this? I don't get it. Like, stop. You're embarrassing yourselves. Yeah, yeah.
All right, I'm gonna go get more coffee while you read the paragraph that
Deal.
begins with the word
There
here.
are, yes.
Here we might.
Oh, we're there. Yes, that's right. Okay. Here, we might call for a sociological analysis of the part played in the intellectual education of all intellectuals by the required initiation, however diverse in depth, commitment, or passion, into Marxism. I'm going to read that again because I read it weird with the commas. I think it's important. Here, we might call for a sociological analysis of the part played in the intellectual education of all intellectuals by the required initiation, however diverse in depth, commitment, or passion, into Marxism. In fact, we need a sociology of knowledge to enable us to study the impression we may have in our 20s that we know perfectly well how to think about what there is to know on the subject of social class. This is a collective experience shared by almost everyone and is so completely institutionalized that it renders formidably difficult something that should be routine. That is, to approach the issue of classes in general virtually from scratch and reconsider what it means to classify. What is the relation between a social class and a biological or botanical class? Okay, shots taken at Marx, or Marxists, rather. These are the rather simple. Oh, I'll read the subtitle. The logic. So now we're on a new section. The logic of research and the logic of exposition. These are the rather simplistic questions that I shall address in this first lecture. In order to present the most persuasive and convincing picture, I shall progress from the more obvious to the more unexpected. I shall today merely try to put the questions, although I obviously have to admit that this is a slightly artificial procedure, insofar as I have only been able to formulate some of these questions after the event, that is, after due reflection and analysis. One of the difficulties in transmitting scientific knowledge is precisely the fact that, for the purposes of communication, we are often obliged to describe things in a sequence that was not the sequence of their discovery.
Mm-hmm.
All epistemologists agree that the logic of research and the logic of a narrative exposition of research are completely different. But the logic of exposition has its own impetus and imperatives that create a kind of discourse on research, which has very little to do with what really happens in the process of research. I myself, when engaged in this kind of work, for example, the craft of sociology, have had to mark out separate stages. For instance, you have to gain control of the object and then construct it, which never occur in that guise in practice. Similarly, we are frequently unable to formulate clearly the problems we have been addressing until we have found the answers. The answers help us to rephrase the question more accurately, and in so doing, to refocus the debate. Shots taken
Mm-hmm.
at scientism, too. This dilemma is the perfect illustration of what I was saying just now. My course of lectures will be a compromise between the reality of research. It might occur to me to wonder, well, what does naming actually imply? What is a nomination? And the requirements of my exposition, which will lead me to elaborate as a series of problems something that did not proceed in that sequence at all.
All right. Now, real quick before we get into this next little section,
Yeah, the meaty bit.
I wanted to draw your attention to a couple of the sort of meta things about the live chat here. And so, shout out to Tyler Murphy, David Ruiz, and the Marin Academy. Great to have you all in here. Also, Engels M. Lark. Great to see you. Great to see you. I'm not going to read all of the comments, but the Marin Academy, I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah.
Is it Lori?
Yeah,
What
I'm not.
up?
I think is it Spencer, right? I'm not sure.
What up
I'm
to
not.
Spencer too?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, maybe
whichever.
I should say like Dr. Johnson, Professor
Yeah,
Johnson. But
exactly. Whoever. I'm assuming it's Dr. Johnson. Yeah, yeah. You're not on a first name basis with her.
I
Yeah.
know, I know. I'm so sorry, but to be fair, I've been following Professor Dr. Lori Johnson's work for years and years and
I
years.
know.
Yes,
Way longer
this
than
would be
me.
my
Yeah.
first. Yes, exactly.
Way longer than me. Yeah.
Parasocial credits. I'm cashing them out now.
Yeah, Lori. It is Lori, by the way. She just said so. I've been
Oh,
uh,
nice.
I've been friends with Bauer since I think 2014, and when he saw us collaborate on this channel, he was like, he was like, "What?" He was very surprised, because he thought only he knew about you. So yeah, it was awesome. Yeah. Okay,
Yes, I
now
was pleasantly surprised. I didn't expect the collaboration. I didn't see the overlap until it happened, and then it was so obvious and beautiful. Yes, very happy.
it is very obvious once you kind of realize what's going on here.
Mhm.
But Before we go for a little commercial break, I just want to say that she said it was the title of the stream that got her. Originally, the title of the stream was Reading Classification Struggles. And then I realized no one will click on that. And so I changed the title of the stream to. And by the way, there were only 3 people watching it after 25 minutes, which is really bad. So I changed it to The Problem of Calling Someone an Idiot, which is actually true. All of this is just base building so that he can go into the problem with calling someone an idiot. And you could think about what he's teaching people as the method and mode of his sort of pedagogy, that just by listening to it, it actually equips you with something. It's a martial art. And he thinks of it as a martial art. And you could think of it as a way of dealing with people on the internet or in your real life who might call you an idiot. And really, he has a much more theoretical, elaborate, and based way of saying when you point the finger, there's a bunch of pointing right back at you. It's almost like he's going to do that in a theory way. And if you're curious about how he's going to do that and what that's all about, well then, stick around. We'll be right back. But I want to show you all a sneak peek into what I've been doing out here on the farm in the construction of the TU studio. So I'm going to run that little PSA, and we'll be right back after this. TU is building a studio. I have officially cleared ground. I've been working on it for the last several months, on and off, but am, as of this last week, beginning to get a lot more traction on the project because more money has come in. So thank you so much for those who have already contributed via donations for the TU studio. It's going to happen no matter what, but the question is when. If you want to help speed up the process, make things smoother sailing, and help me keep creating the kinds of content that you love, and even better, the kinds of content that is to come. There's a whole new era getting rolled out. If you want to help make it possible and usher it in smoother and faster, the best way to do that is to make a donation via the Zelle link up on the screen here. You see that QR code? Use that QR code. Once you have an account, that QR code should take you to where you can make the bank transfer with zero charge, which is really sweet, huh? Yeah, we love that. That's why we're using Zelle. Thank you so much for helping make this possible. And we're back. Hold on. Wait, why can't it see us? Hold on. Oh, there we go. What's up, everybody? We're back.
And why is it watching us?
Yeah.
If you remember just before the break, you were bringing up how we're kind of learned that we can't really call anyone an idiot because we'll never have all the information. And I was just thinking, you kind of made me feel like an idiot when I called Professor Dr. Laurie Johnson by her first name. And you haven't taken into account the fact that my field recently has been teaching in the Nordic countries for years where we don't do titles, where everything is first name, even in those formal stages.
Oh, really?
So yes, I was trying to be like, oh yeah, how dare you idiotize me?
Well, and for everybody in this space, I can't think of any professor I've ever brought on who wants to be called Doctor their last name, right? Nobody so far has ever wanted that, and they're always very like it's so just so everybody knows. Yeah, I was totally busting his balls. That's what I was doing there. Yeah.
Duh. Yes. Okay. Yeah. And I did not take it personally. I just, in the commercial break, I even said to Dave, hey, I have a really stupid, probably going to bomb kind of dad joke coming back on that I'd like to say. And I hope I delivered in that it was underwhelming.
I'm very disappointed.
Before we get back, I want to call myself out in the best way possible. I'm going to totally embarrass myself. So I literally wrote this down word for word. I was thinking, oh, okay, today when I'm doing classification struggles for the first time with Dr. Uncle Dave here on Theory Underground, I've got something. The first line I'm going to say is, I thought of wearing my shirt as my pants and my pants as my shirt, and then to say, I struggled to classify which was my shirt and which was my pants this morning, but then I thought better of it. I wrote that down word for word, thinking, I'm going to be so funny when I come on Theory Underground today.
But you did. But why did you decide? Why did you think better of it? I think it would have been great if you came on wearing your pants. You'd need a hole in the crotch, though, right? You'd need a hole in the crotch. Do you have some crotchy hole
Yeah, like a mouth
pants?
hole.
Yeah, something like that. Oh my God.
Unzip for drinking my water. There you go. I'm just, we're all out here just struggling to classify. That's what's up.
That's what's going on here. All right, I'm gonna take it from the top of what is classification, and on the
Mhm.
third paragraph that I read, you'll all hear the connection to calling people an idiot, or at least his first sort of hint that that's where this is going. What is classification? To put it briefly, I shall focus today on the following questions. What does classification imply? What does classification imply when it concerns the social world? A logician may find a solution to the problem of classification in general, and the biological systems of zoology or botany solve it very well, even in a way that can indeed be very useful for us as sociologists by making us realize that things are not so simple in the social sciences. For when we come to consider the social world, by the way, when he says us as social sciences, I am curious if he is saying all of us in this room insofar as we are sociologists, where he's kind of saying we're all philosophers now, we're all thinkers of the social now, or is he speaking across his audience specifically to the sociologists in the room? Because this is a general course in sociology, but it's delivered to the public, which is something he's going to repeatedly come back to, which is like part of why he has to teach it a little different than how it would otherwise be done if it was behind closed doors. Because all of the lectures at the Collège de France are public, and you can just attend it if you're in Paris at the time, which is amazing, and how it should be done in every city, of course. But I am curious about the word "us" here and how he uses it, and his self-awareness about us and we kind of statements comes throughout the whole series of these lectures, and so I'm going to assume though that he just means all of us insofar as we're social thinkers. For when we come to consider the social world, classification in fact classifies subjects who classify in their turn. It classifies objects that have the property of being classifying subjects. So he is on the shoulders of Heidegger here. And for Heidegger, the ontological division between Dasein and other kinds or modes of being comes down to the fact that there is a being who's asking the question in the first place. And there's an approach in philosophy that tries to be like, we're all of the same stuff. And it's like, well, except that we are the ones writing and questioning and wondering. And, these questions keep us up at night. And the answers that we come up with to these questions change how we live our lives. It doesn't change how the tree exists, right? The belief I have about the tree could change my relation to the tree, and I might just cut it down. But my beliefs about the tree won't change the way the tree grows if I leave it alone. So Dasein is the being for whom its being is a question, and he's saying that the social thinker is a classifier of objects, but that it is itself classifying and being classified in that process.
I have an extrapolation I made from his chapter 1 of Pascalian Meditations.
Yeah.
I went through the first chapter of the 3 books recommended.
I fucking love that
to
book.
be able, it's so good. I think it's definitely going to be my favorite. And it's more in that aphoristic kind of can skip around style format, which we were talking about that we love. But I wrote, to be able to bracket out the question of the interest of the question is a rare privilege. I took like 3 aspects of that chapter and smushed them together to make that quote.
Totally.
And I think it's kind of related to what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, the rare privilege of schole, of leisure time, of time energy, that it doesn't have to be reduced to labor power, which even most academics today do not have as a privilege, right? Like most academics are so instrumentalized, they don't have schole, yet they're supposed to do scholastic things like, actually reading things in a scholarly fashion, but they don't have that privilege of leisure. And so a lot of what he's doing in Pascalian Meditations is a critique of people who did have that privilege, not being aware that they have it, yet thinking they're interrogating all the fundamental presuppositions. And it's like Descartes, Husserl, and Heidegger, all in their own three ways, are trying to do this radical critique of their presuppositions. Heidegger's going to be a lot more open to including a lot of givens and priors and doing so unabashedly. And as a reaction or response counter to Husserl and Descartes, but for all three of them, they all miss the fact that they are creatures of skole, which is so important for time energy theorists everywhere. Anyway, so he says, we must therefore call into question the classifications that are made by the social subject. Do these resemble botanical or zoological classifications, or another kind of classification? Do all classifications have the same import? You will very soon appreciate how far a problematic constructed after the event is actually a fiction, because it necessarily contains its own answer. It is very difficult to put a question without giving the answer and proving that the question and answer had not been constructed in that order. Otherwise, by definition, there would have been no research, or it would be too good to be true. This is true with academic writing, but it's more on its face obvious with a lot of popular bestsellers, especially like the kind of brainy ones where they're like, I have this big question, I've been thinking a lot about this, and then they kind of construct this narrative about how they came to the answer, and it's like, no, actually, there's all this other stuff that led you to that answer, and now you've constructed this either consciously or unconsciously. You've put together this story of how you got there. The question of classification as it is treated in sociology obliges us to ask, who does the classifying in this social world? Does everyone classify? Do we classify all the time? How do we classify? Do we classify in the same way as a logician does in using concepts or definitions as the basis of a classification? And then, if everyone classifies, do all these classifications and all their classifiers along with them have the same social weight? To take some examples from very different contexts, does an official at the INSEE, which is, by the way, going to come up a lot, so get familiar with that acronym. It means National Institute of Statistics and Economic Studies, who uses a scholarly or semi-scholarly taxonomy to classify, have the same status as an inspector of taxes who says, above this particular band of income, you will pay this particular rate of tax. Are the classifications used by sociologists when they construct the category of agents who have such and such a property commensurate with the classifications imposed by the preacher in distinguishing between heretics and true believers? If we start by asking whether all classifications have the same social import, we are led to ask a very difficult question. Are all acts of classification equally prone to be self-validating? Politicians, for instance, are able to formulate arguments about the social world which seem highly likely to be true since they invest them with a kind of self-validating authority. We can plot social classifications from the entirely gratuitous, I shall return to this point using the example of the insult, to those which, as the saying goes, lay down the law. Right there is a huge difference between the tax collector, the board that oversees the tax collection process, deciding what are the different classes, and a preacher who's using classification to decide between heretics and true believers. And then, on the other hand, somebody who's out here being like, Bauer, you're a fucking idiot. And then the law saying, actually, it's rude to call him that because he actually literally is.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah, these are very, very big differences. And he'll say, the psychiatrist or the teacher calling someone an idiot because of their social function, their role, and the institution backing them. when they say that you're an idiot, it's very different from when somebody on the street just calls someone else on the street an idiot, because in that situation, the person being called an idiot can always be like, no, you. But when you're being called that by the teacher in the classroom, you can't just be like, no, you. You know what I mean? It's different.
There's at the risk of kind of really vulgar example, I'm constantly thinking here of the kind of quality quantity thing, especially in the realm of sociological research. We literally have quantitative and qualitative research, and my main job these days is also qualitative research. But I think that in the broader philosophical sense, it's like we live in a world of quantification. There's a desperate desire, the dominant narrative, the primacy of the quantitative, of quantity. We can, through money, in this case with the tax example, literally quantify certain levels. We can develop not continuous, but very discrete, definable, rigid, numerical strata that are fixed or rigid, or that we can move around accordingly, et cetera, et cetera. But I think we forget is the quality quantity thing. I'm reminded of the Engelsian, if that's the word for it, of the a change in quantity eventually becomes a change in quality kind of maxim. Well, I think what enough people don't really focus on, especially in this context, is it by definition doesn't work in the opposite direction at all. And that should tell us something. If anything, that's even more important than realizing a change in quantity in a kind of dialectical materialism way of the economic strata of society, and that kind of material needs that we have ought to be addressed numerically, quantifiably. But what about the salvaging of the quality, the qualitative? I'm also thinking a lot of Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, where basically his whole thing is this idea of quality. I don't know if anyone's ever read that. It's a great kind of perusing fiction style philosophy text that, it's not going to blow your mind or anything.
Shout out in chat if you've read Zam. If you have read Zam multiple times, let us know. Because I'm gonna guess half of you have read it, and that at least a couple of you have read it multiple times, as have I. Yeah, that's a fantastic book. Yeah, but it is, like you said, it's a inquiry into quality itself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is something that
yes, a change in quantity can become a change in quality, but a change in quality will never be a change in quantity. It's just kind of beyond that. And so all the arrows are kind of pointing towards one thing that ought to be the prime directive, if you will, to speak kind of weird sci-fi language. But instead, we've just deified, we have fetishized the quantifiable to the nth degree, and we're stuck in this space. I mean, that's why, my favorite and most recommended philosophy book of all time to anyone in my life will always be, the rest of my life, I'm sure, The Dialectic of Enlightenment, or just Dialectic of Enlightenment. And I'm thinking, like, here it's following in this train, but in a much more updated, more grounded, more broad kind of sense, that instrumental reason, scientism, objectivism, logical positivism, all these things that have more or less convinced ourselves that their whole existence is grounded on this idea that they're post-myth, anti-myth, defined in antagonization to myth. But not only are they mythologies themselves, yes, exactly. But it's like, not only are they not superstitions or mythologies themselves, but the worst part, beyond anything else, is that they are fundamentally incapable by their inner working pieces to acknowledge that they are, in fact, that, which is the worst kind of thing. It is a total, at the risk of sounding a bit like intense, but it's a blindness unlike we've ever seen in terms of levels of ideology, I think, in the history of the world. It believes more than anything, it is beyond everything else and itself. And that's, anyway.
No,
bit of a tirade there, but I'm so passionate. Yeah,
it's perfect, as well as a tie-in. You already brought up the other book I'm having you read, sort of. So everyone, just so you know, for this series of called Voices, that's a provisional sort of working title of this series. I've got a few different people that I'm reading different things with, right? And so Ruiz and Stanley and Bauer are the main three right now, but there's on the public side. But then I've also got gold and platinum subscribers who are doing it just on the private side. But Bauer, everyone kind of comes with their own capacities, interests. We see where our interests overlap, and then we do something together. And he said, I can do 5 hours of preparation behind the scenes every week for this project. And, so he was like, should I be reading the, classification struggles ahead of time? And I said, no, I want you to fresh react as we go. But be reading the Outline for a Theory of Practice by Bourdieu and the Pascalian Meditations by Bourdieu, which are two very different books, both very important. I also brought up In Other Words, which is a great interview. And so they're all very different styles and modes. And, I could totally see if you've read a little bit of each one, then you kind of know. Today is a more like you're feeling more like this than that because they are so different. But we already talked about Pascalian Meditations. We won't talk about In Other Words today. But to say something about the outline, he is a huge critic of the division between sociology and anthropology. Huge critic. And he's got a tremendous influence on Sarutu here at Theory Underground, right? So Socioanalysis and Alien Anthropology Research Unit at TU. The reason that is so influenced by him is because socioanalysis, you can't do it without learning field analysis from Bourdieu. He also coins the term socioanalysis. He talks about it throughout his whole life of work, throughout the whole he's talking about it. Okay, but the alien anthropology side, it's like because we know we are in the post-class fractured mass, having an awareness that you're the outsider inside outer, you're an alien to your next door neighbor, even though if you look the same as they do, in a superficial sense, that doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't mean anything. If you are reading about this kind of stuff, you're an alien in your own society, right? And so, a big way that Bourdieu ties in here, he problematizes this distinction between sociology and anthropology because with anthropology, as Bauer was just saying, it's so easy to see that everyone in every other culture is living a life in relation to myths and superstition. Mm-hmm. But then it's like impossible to see it on ourselves. Well, that's why we do sociology on ourselves. We're in a society, but that's the anthropos over there. And so we'll analyze them like they're a bunch of monkeys. And literally, they do this. What's the lady, Jane Bennett? She goes and...
Jane Goodall?
Goodall, thank you. Jane Goodall goes and there's two ladies, and I was reading about both of them last year when I was thinking about this. There's Goodall, and then there's the other one. So there's the gorilla lady, and then there's the chimp lady. Well, guess what? Both of them call themselves anthropologists. They're looking at monkeys. They're looking at primates, and they're like, I'm an anthropologist. And then you have other anthropologists, and they go look at people from other cultures. And it's like, okay, well, do you think that sociologists think that they're doing that? No, because it's like, well, this is us, though. And for Bourdieu, it's more problematic than that, obviously, because he's from, what's the place that was so oppressed by France at this time?
Algeria.
Thank you. Yeah, and so he's from Algeria, and the French were pretty brutal in their colonization of Algeria, and so Bourdieu he's like, oh, so my people are studied as anthropological objects, whereas the people I'm surrounded by here and teaching in sociology don't see themselves as anthropological objects, but see themselves as sociological subjects. Like, this is a pretty big difference. And it ties right to what you're saying about, like, oh yeah, well, we don't have a myth, right? Yeah.
Yeah, when your myth is that you don't have one, there's a problem. That's not a good contradiction. That is a deep issue. I don't imagine how it's surmountable in the current state of things, because there's so much someone needs to... We're even beyond bracketing at this point. We're at a literal, what's it called when you depropagandize someone? Deprogram kind of their brain.
Yeah.
But how do you do that at a social level? Because when we're talking about the social level, we're talking about maybe it would need to deprogram itself. But that's like, I don't know, calling a truck without an engine to come and tow your car without any wheels. Where do we go from here? And that's really why it feels so stuck the more I think we learn about this. And it's good. We have to tarry with that. We have to confront that fact as reality anyway.
Okay, now we're about to continue reading, but I decided I'm going to run this, and we'll be right back after this for our sort of the last few paragraphs and our concluding thoughts. By the way, we have some very exciting concluding thoughts, so don't go anywhere. And make sure to click like. Also, what's up, Stephen Wallace? I see you there in the chat. Ruiz is still here. That's awesome. Marin Academy is still here. That's great. We'll be right back. Hate to interrupt, but we would be remiss to not share an advertisement from our sponsors. And we're not sponsored by any corporate or state entities other than ourselves. So I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the past courses and the ongoing courses here at TU. Because if any of them sound exciting to you, well, you can access all of them by becoming a subscriber. That's right, subscribers make all of this possible. Subscribers get access to the course I taught on Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, as well as the course that I taught the first half of last year, Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity, the second half for which I will be teaching this winter. I've also taught critical media theory and critical doxology and time energy with my wife, Anne Snellgrove McKerracher, who is the co-host on What's Right. Also, you would get access to the course I taught at the university, 3 semesters worth, on Intro to Critical Social Theory and Socioanalysis. But also, we've had lots of other great professors teach Introduction to Marxism by Chris Cutrone, Intro to Lacan via Seminar 11 with Todd McGowan, Introduction to Ivan Illich with Brian Weeks, the Clinical Structures of Psychoanalysis and Autism with Dr. Leon Brenner, the Michael Downs Seminar, Introduction to Slavoj Zizek, Introduction to Nick Land, and Zizek's For They Know Not What They Do, all taught by Michael Downs, as well as What is Sex? There was a collab that I did with Cadell Last. Theory 101, a collab I did with Hello Gorgias. And then also, of course, there's Carl Jaspers' is The Idea of the University, PMC Consciousness and Ideology. These were early, very important courses that I taught with friends at TU back in 2023. And they remain important to this day. Every one of these courses comes out of an overarching research project. There's a real driving force, mission, and agenda to the research going on at TU because we want to understand the situation for the sake of large-scale structural change focused on the good life. What does that actually mean? If you really want to go deep, obviously, these courses are something you could spend the better part of a year binging while at work. Ongoing courses that come out on a monthly basis are the Fundamental Problems and Core Concepts at TU with yours truly. Also, my seminar, Philosophy of Nature with Nina Power, the Benjamin Studebaker seminar, as well as his course, The 12 Political Theorists. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the line. The only way to make this all possible and really deepen your knowledge and familiarity with all of these different things is to become a subscriber today at http://theoryunderground.com/subscribe. Thank you. What up, everybody? We're back. So let's just dive right back into it. I'm gonna take it from the lay down the law part. So remember, there's a big difference between the insult and laying down the law. Okay. Now, what is there in common between the classifications made by the sociologist or the historian, by any social scientist, in fact, and those made by the botanist, for example? I shall speak of botanical classification in very basic terms because it is not my profession and it is not the direct object of my research. I refer to it, as I said just now, only to shed light on what is specific to sociological classification. Botanists establish classes based on criteria that, in their own terms, may be more or less natural or artificial. Botany and zoology distinguish between two major branches of classification, and this is a useful distinction for a sociologist: the artificial, which they call systems, and the natural, which they call methods. The classification that they call artificial takes as criterion a characteristic chosen either arbitrarily or according to a deliberately decided purpose, with the principle of the choice being facility or rapidity in determining a species. As the ideal is to classify as rapidly as possible, they take a visible characteristic, an external property, such as the color of the eyes. If they take a deeper criterion, like the level of urea in the blood, classification is much less straightforward. Natural classification, however, draws not on some more or less arbitrary convenient criterion, but on a whole set of criteria. It takes as criteria all the organs considered in the order of their real importance for the organism. Natural classifications take into account several elementary characteristics. For instance, structure, form, morphology, anatomy, function, physiology, and ethology. And the most natural classifications are those which manage to take into account the correlations between the different criteria chosen. Man, he just spit that shit off the dome. He's over here just like, straight up, like he's not reading notes to everybody. He's talking, and so he's like, he just laid it out. He's just like, yeah, natural classifications take into account several elementary characteristics, and then he laid out structure, form, morphology, and anatomy, function, physiology, and ethology. What the fuck is ethology? Anyway, and the most natural
It's the study of animal behavior. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. Is it? Okay, cool. And the most natural classifications are those which manage to take into account the correlations between the different criteria chosen. Want to take it for a few, man?
Yeah. Thus, on the basis of this ensemble of criteria with a strong correlation among themselves, they establish classes which they call natural. The word natural is treacherous and will present problems for sociology. These classes are grounded in the nature of things, or as they said in the Middle Ages, cum fondamento in re, with a basis in the things themselves.
Mm.
All the elements of a class established in this way will bear more resemblance to each other than to the elements of any other class, and a natural classification will be a search for sets of characteristics responsible for the greatest possible proportion of the variance observed. One of the problems for classifiers is therefore to find what they call the essential characteristics, that is, the most powerful distinctive traits, so that the important properties may all in some way be deduced from this interrelated set of criteria. A certain type of system may be used, drawing on methods of factor analysis and correspondence analysis, in order to try to provide classifications that combine the universe of pertinent criteria with the reciprocal relations between these criteria. This summary will seem very cursory to the cognoscenti, but I believe that it is sufficient to explain my comparison of the social sciences with the natural sciences. I'd love to offer some words on that, if I may.
No words allowed. No
No words
talking.
allowed. It's a no word zone. Maybe you
No.
hadn't heard because no one said it because no words.
Yeah, it's the unspoken rule.
Well, I'm going to speak with a level of like amateur level knowledge of taxonomy and classification, kind of within the natural sciences, having
Go.
taught some biology courses and always been obsessed with particularly species of bees and ants. Uh, he's hitting the nail on the head here, and I think that in a sense, what this is making me realize is particularly biology. Maybe I would give less credit to other sorts of taxonomical sciences these days, but biology in particular is incredibly aware of the limits of its own classification struggle. And it's so fascinating that, in a sense, our kind of overall enemy, this style of kind of scientism, although biology doesn't necessarily have to be practiced that way, and
No,
most of
no,
the best
no.
ones aren't
Absolutely
that
not.
way, but that
Right.
they're miles ahead of the social scientists in terms of recognizing the limits of their own capacities, the boundaries of their methods. And that classification is a more, maybe utilitarian would be a vulgar way of putting it, like kind of aspect use tool for them in the sense of making sense of the world, categorizing things. But here it's funny. You can kind of preach to a choir that is so uh, immediately their instinct would be to recoil against like the natural sciences. And it's kind of going, I know he doesn't explicitly say like biology's kind of got this on lock more than any of you, but I'm sure they're starting to feel it. And we ought
Mm.
to. We ought to feel
Mm-hmm.
that. we're too much in this space that we don't think we have anything to learn from that side of the aisle, for lack of a better word. And in this case, I think we very, very, very much do. Talk to any serious biologist, and they will be fully aware and be able to articulate it perfectly, the limits of classification and taxonomy. Yeah.
Yeah, man. This is one of the most exciting things for the Voices project, which I see as part and parcel to the next 25 years that I've spent the last 5 years preparing for. One of the most exciting parts of it is, it's like, I realized that there was this little thinker that was me. This little guy was like, I want to have a very important book. I want to say important things. I want to be an important person. And I just wanted to like rush into it. And then I realized like everyone's doing that. And the more time I spend studying this stuff, the more I realized maybe I shouldn't be doing that. In fact, it seems like our elders did that. And our elders did that in such a way so that they didn't really establish the institutions that would be needed to cultivate independent learners, and actually transmit the legacy of their work, which is not theirs, but is a work, right? And so it's like we lack these things, and our elders didn't do that work because they were raised within this schooling system that taught them that they're parts of artificial peer groups or generations that they now reify and take very seriously. And I realized we need to give ourselves time, right? And so I say that in Waypoint, and give ourselves time to develop. And so I was like, for these next 5 years, I'm just going to give myself the time, and I'm not going to try to speak to everybody. I'm not going to just try to speak to academia. I'm just really trying to speak to a handful of fellow travelers. And it's more like a thinking out loud kind of process, kind of thinking in draft mode, not worrying too much about perfection or over editing or polish or whatever. And so, the end, that all culminates here at the end of this year. Because the book that I promised I would write to the parents of the kids who will be 25 and 30 years, that book, I have to write that this year, at the end of this year. And so the retreat here in September is a big part of that. And hold on, what you just did made it go away. Let's see if I can bring us back.
I didn't.
I got
know.
it. I got
I'm
it.
Learning.
I fixed it.
Okay.
I got it. Yeah, I know.
Okay.
I know you got to go here in a second. So
I need to not touch things. Yes, got it.
No, it's good. We're perfect. We're perfect. And so all that to say, the Voices Project is about thinking longer term, being a part of the history of not just ideas, but of real people thinking about real problems that in some cases haven't really gone away. And the concepts that they develop for thinking about those might still be useful or inescapable, or we need to deconstruct. But in any sort of sense, like the point is we have to continue with this, right? Well, once you get to the realization that there's so much more work to do, the natural thing I think to do is what Hegel or Wittgenstein did, which is to leave academia and spend some time just teaching children elementary stuff. And they both spent quite a lot of time doing that. Hegel couldn't have written the encyclopedias that he wrote without teaching elementary school, right? And I'm excited to not just homeschool, but also to be working with disenfranchised teachers within the schooling system, like Ian, or homeschooled parents like Daniel and Michelle, right? Like those kinds of people, working with them while at the same time teaching your own kids and maybe some other people's. For me, the reason I'm so excited about it is I get to teach biology, which is the best way to learn biology. And what you're talking about is how this can kind of shed light on that process. You can see how humble the field of biology actually is. But in seeing how humble the field actually is, you realize when a person's doing a scientism with biology.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's like I get to do that with all of the fields that would be taught, at an elementary level. And so I'm really excited for that. And I see the Voices Project as sort of setting that up. Like we're going to find our canon. or canons, really, because I'll have my canon, you'll have your canon, every family will have their canon, and then we'll see where our canons overlap, and where our canons overlap shows us ways that we can collaborate. And so I love doing this with you, man. Any closing thoughts you have here before you got to bounce?
Honestly, I just have to say I'm a real big, proud voice boy, and I'm happy to be here. But with deep sincerity, I love and appreciate the opportunity. At the risk of sounding cheesy, who doesn't love cheese? I love cheese.
I love cheese.
I the opportunity to learn and to do it with a close friend, and to bring in some of our personal relationship here onto the big screen and the big wide world it's nice. It's beautiful that we have more of an excuse to connect on a separate level than we usually do, and it's only adding to our relationship, and I really appreciate that. I greatly look forward to going through this deeper and wider and harder. That my mind goes to these places anyway, but yeah, praise be Gordon Jangus all around, and thank you. You're going to continue a bit without me, yeah?
Yeah, I was gonna just say some things and then close out, but actually now David Ruiz is gonna be popping on here, and we're gonna be reading some Postman on stupidity. So we're gonna stay on the theme of calling people idiots, which we only just kind of scratched the surface of it here together. It was all foreplay. And so it's. I hope everyone gets some idiotic blue balls on the topic, and we'll maybe give you a little payoff for all that with the Postman on stupid talk, but then we will continue where we get much deeper into what we're talking about, how this classification struggle stuff will actually free you from the opinions of others. That is what this is. This book is a deconstruction of the opinions of others from the time that sociology was at its absolute pinnacle. So it's not going to get any better than this. It's only gone downhill from here. So, yeah.
But good sir, Dr. Uncle Dave, I need to jet. My best to Anne and all the aminals, and till next time, good sir.
All right, man. Take care. Peace.
See ya. Cheers.
All right, folks. It's just me now. What's up? I got to go check on one of those animals, in fact. And so I'm going to run the little PSA for the not the one you've already seen, folks. This is the one that is usually at the end of things. I'm going to go ahead and run that, and then I'll be right back to say some things direct from me to you. This won't be just me with someone else and you voyeuristically or parasocially getting to peek into a conversation. Of course, I know it's a lot more than parasocial or voyeur, but it's going to be direct. I'll come back and I'll just talk to you. So we'll be back right after this. Subscribers get access to all past courses at Theory Underground, as well as ongoing courses taught by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Nina Power. Subscribers also get access to monthly research seminars, and the higher tiers of involvement unlock discussions and one-on-one small group tutelage. So if you're like me and you're never a huge bookish kind of person, but somewhere along the way you got really into listening to educational materials, if you got really into listening to podcasts and then books at work, if you love going deep into ideas, but you're just not a traditional bookish kind of person, well, this is where the alliance between people like us and people who are more bookish and specialized are able to meet to work through these things and do so in defense of the human, in defense of our dignity, in defense of our common humanity and our intellectual integrity. This is not a place where we're going to kick you out because you're pro-life or pro-choice, or where you are an atheist or a agnostic or a Christian. But it is a place where you're expected to love one another regardless of such things, and to show up for people in your actual IRL real life communities regardless of such things. And if that is exciting for you, and if you're excited to learn about what this approach, this method, this school of thought has to offer, then I'm excited to meet you.
Subscribe today.
Close enough. All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. I had to go check on my dog. And now, David is just cramming some food real quick before he pops in here. And so I'm going to say hello to the chat. And then I'm going to tell you all a secret. Okay? So, who do we have here? Oh, Anne's in the chat. What's up, Anne? Yeah, we did it live. We decided to do it live. Lots of people here in the chat. Yeah, and Marin Academy said, looking forward to your talk for us on August 12th, Dave. As am I. Lori. That's going to be a very cool thing. I can't wait, actually. All right. I'm raising up my desk here. Shout out to Chris, the homie with the tech. He got me this this desk that goes up and down. He works in this urban mining depot. He's able to salvage and recycle other people's refuse or their discarded technology. And so he gets all this stuff for free, usually refurbishes it and then sells it. But when he got this raising, lowering electronic desk, he was like, I have to give this to Dave. And that is so special. Thank you so much, Chris, for that. Also, thank you to the people who have recently donated to TU, specifically for the studio. Yeah, the studio is really, really exciting. I mean, that is coming along. You should have already seen that it's coming along. If you were watching earlier, I did play something that shows you how along it's come. In fact, it's come along further than that video would have shown you. But I'll save that for later. What I want to tell you about right now is a little bit about this R3 treat, the TU retreat in September. So the three R's for this retreat are recollect, reground, and reproject. Reproject is a neologism that I've developed. It is using retroversion and Heideggerian projection, which has to do with your modal understanding, attunement, and place within the symbolic order. It draws off of field analysis. It draws off of being in the world. It draws off of the critique of political economy via Das Kapital. There's a lot going on there. But I want to give you a quick little idea of what's going to go on at this retreat. Now, there's this question: how well do I have to already know TU to be at this retreat, since this retreat is going to be a little bit more intimate compared to TUCon? Well, not very much, really. You could be a relatively new person here at TU. The point is, like, how have you been involved? How long have you been involved? Not necessarily showing your face and name, but at least kind of following the work, right? And so you can introduce yourself and fill out your sort of application to attend the retreat via the link that I'm going to share with you here right now in the chat. So here you go. Boom. That's how you fill out the form. If you're here, if you're in the chat, like if you're Stephen Wallace, if you're David Ruiz, if you're Lori, if you're anyone else who's watching this, if you've been following the work, well, then you might want to be here. Anne will be here. Benjamin Studebaker will be here. Matthew Stanley will be here. Alex Sappington will be here. A bunch of other people will be here. We've got a bunch of people filling out this application now. 7 spots remain. It does cost money because this includes meals, and we want those meals to be thoughtful and delicious, healthy meals, as well as we are providing camping spots. So this is room and board, right? What else do you need to know about it? There are a couple of internship opportunities available for the week prior. right? So Alex is going to be an intern. Who else is going to be an intern? Well, we're taking applications right now. So if you'd like to come learn some regenerative agriculture and kind of be out here in the woods and kind of see how the farm operation is working and learn a little bit about the homesteading that we've done over the last 30 years in this area of the country, well, then this would be a great little peek into that lifestyle. And you might even get to help me with some construction work. But at bare minimum, we'll have some fires and fireside chats and probably do some weeding and some planting and stuff like that. But what's going to happen at the actual retreat? Well, I've got a quick little outline of what's going to happen right here, and I'm going to run through it real quick. Well, wait, where is my outline? It's not on the form itself. I just shared you the link to the form. It's not on the form. Let me pull up where it is. It's right here. Okay. So just to kind of give you a sense for what's going on, there's going to be esoteric and exoteric parts to this, right? So anybody who was paying attention to what was going on with the Agora here at TU should know already that the Agora is like a very exoteric exercise, right? Which means practicing speaking to the public, speaking to the outside of an in-group, speaking to whoever might be passing by. But to properly be the Agora at TU, it has to both be live, online, and live IRL. It has to be both, and it can't just be live to an audience in a closed room somewhere. It has to actually be like public on the street or like off the street, but where people are passing by, so that people can kind of, oh, you're recording, what are you doing? Kind of peek in, right? You have to be open to the live viewer who's not just passing by on the internet, but who is also passing by IRL. That is the exercise. There's a lot of theory that goes into it. I talk about it at my seminars, but that's kind of just a background thing. What I want to say about that, though, is that this retreat takes that exercise into another level. So the first half of the retreat is spent doing a more esoteric conversation that is not live and that is kind of just like a reflection about where we've been. We're recollecting, but we're also collecting, right? So, which is like grouping, right? So we're playing off of the double entendre in the term recollect, right? And then we're regrounding, which is we're grounding in the sense that we're touching grass by being in nature and eating good food. We're also grounding in the sense that we are thinking about like the ideas that matter to us. And then we're also grounding in the sense of kind of touching grass socially by being places that are, I think, the most important places to be in America, where you are going to be around some, not just normies or normal people, but specific variants of people who care and are doing interesting things or who are open to doing things differently. And so we'll be doing some of that. And then there will be like a big event. And the big event will be open to the public. And there'll be amazing catered farm-to-table food. And, in those 3 days, between September 25th and 27th, you'll also get to go to the lake a couple of times. You'll also, different lakes, both world-class lakes, pristine North American lakes, Lake Coeur d'Alene and Lake Pend d'Oreille. Hey, hold on. Daisy's crying because her treat is out of reach. Come here, Daisy. Come here, Daisy. There's your treat. There you go. Here's your treat. You want that? There you go. Poor girl. She couldn't get her treat. All right. And then the other things that'll happen are like some panel conversations, some presentations, a keynote presentation from Benjamin, and a couple of important presentations from moi. All right. And then with that said, that's the stuff about the retreat. Now I'm going to record something. It's going to be like a little PSA that I'm able to run on Voices. So, by the way, welcome, Ruiz. Great to have you in here, man. I'm just going to record this thing real quick, and then we'll start our segment. But if you want to go ahead and start setting up, you can officially. Let me make. Oh wait. It says that he's joining, but he's not actually in the room yet. So he's probably able to hear me live. So what's up, man? You're probably having some tech issues. No worries. I'm just going to record this thing real quick. Weird Solowski says, interviewing people sounds fun. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. The Sarutu stuff that we do at this event is going to be a lot of fun, I think. All right. So, welcome to Voices. I just want to say a couple quick little things about what Voices is doing this year, 2025. So, at Theory Underground, there is a way to become involved at the gold or platinum levels, which means that you get more what Benjamin calls bespoke treatment, which is to say a kind of teaching that is dialed in to your particular interests, your particular needs. Gold and platinum subscribers get varying levels of that from Benjamin and from myself. But when you're getting it from me, what does that mean? What does that look like, right? Well, it's in part this Voices project. And that's the provisional title that I've given to this new podcast that I'm doing, for which there is both a public side and a private side. The public side to Voices is what I'm doing with the people you see here on the channel. Whereas the private side is what I'm doing with people who are gold or platinum subscribers. And gold level gets to do one thing per month, and platinum gets to do multiple things per month. And basically, it's not where I'm just going to read and engage like with you on literally anything that you're interested in, because I just can't do that. I tried to do that in academia and it doesn't work. It has to align with my interests, because I have a very hard time focusing on things that are not immediately interesting, right? I think a lot of you ADHD brained kinds of people can probably relate to that, right? If you're deeply invested in it, you're probably able to focus on it, right? So the idea is, with Voices, communing with those voices that have a claim on us or which we would like to claim, right? And so, for instance, Neil Postman is one of those ones that we'd like to claim. We want to keep him alive. We think that he's absolutely essential to our moment, and trying to keep him around and stay in dialogue with him is something that I'm doing with Ruiz, right? But there's a lot of other voices that lay claim on us. And so I'm coming to some of those with Matthew Stanley, or I'm not sure where Bourdieu fits in. I'm doing that with Bauer. Where does that really fit in? Both has a claim on us, but also I'd like to claim, right? It's not just, though, that these are people on my canon. It's that you, as you try to think, like, what is your canon? Like, what are the essential texts for you? If your canon overlaps with mine, if there is an overlap, then we should find like a Venn diagram. Where do we meet? And then focus in on that, right? And so if you are especially interested in any of the stuff I've ever talked about on this channel, if any of the stuff that I've ever talked about on this channel either is or might be on your canon, then this might benefit you, and it would definitely benefit me, which is why I'm doing it. I love to do this. This is a lot of fun. It's one of the most fun things you can do with other people, and I hope the fact that I have spent so much time in these various fields and that I have some degree of professional authorization to do this kind of work, as well as so much that I've done outside of the institution, I hope that that actually adds something to it for you. And so if you're interested in any of that, go ahead and become a subscriber at theoryunderground.com/subscribe, and go for those higher tiers where I'm able to spend more time with you one-on-one, and we'll work through these texts. Sound good? Awesome. Thank you. Peace. Great. That was it. What's up, Ruiz? How you doing, man? Oh, wait. He keeps coming in and out. What's going on? Let me message him here. Are you here, David? What's up, man?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go. I can
Oh
hear you
man,
now.
what a mission.
Yeah,
Of
you've been
course, where we
in
need the
and
computers
out.
most.
You've been in and out. What is your
Yeah.
computer breaking? What's going on for you?
Um, I don't know. Every time I would turn the camera on, it would just stay black, and then it would just keep spinning on me. And then it said host has been notified, and then when it let me in, it just stayed gray. So I was like, oh my God, what the hell is going on? And then I had you on my phone so I could hear you saying that it's let me in. And I'm just like, oh shit, I'm not in though. So, but I think we're good now. So
That's hilarious. Well, no worries. Glad to have you now. I just finished recording a little PSA for the advanced stuff going on here at TU. So now that we're done with that, we can basically get right to it.
nice.
While you
Nice.
pull up the text, what is it called? Stupid Talk? What is that one called?
Crazy talk, stupid talk. You want to do that one first, or you want to do
I want to do that one
the
first.
soft revolution? That one first? Okay.
I want to do it first for reasons that I'll get into here. Because otherwise, we're kind of out of order already. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
reason
no,
we're
this is all over the place, so it's good.
yeah, this being the continuation of what I was just doing with Bauer, is why I want to do the stupid talk one, because the title of this stream is the problem of calling someone an idiot, right?
Okay. All right, let
And
me see
so
here then.
I think the Postman is going to be really good, a good compliment for that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that this book particularly, like you said, it's good on that. It's basically like him calling bullshit on, people saying stuff that he feels is bullshit, but at the same time acknowledging that this is just an accusation. It's not like an objective fact and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Perfect.
All right. So I think my computer is something's going on with it because it's not pulling up the PDF now. What is going on with this thing?
While you pull it up, I'm going to go ahead and say a couple things to the chat. What's up, chat? How many of you have been here this whole time? How many of you have just gotten here? Go ahead and let me know via the chat function. If you're listening to this while at work or otherwise preoccupied in a way that makes it impossible to say anything in the chat, just go ahead and say it telepathically, and I will totally hear what you're thinking without you having to type it in. I'll still hear you. Right now, I just heard somebody say, "Yep, I'm working at Amazon, loading boxes onto a pallet. I'm not able to say anything right now. I'd have to go take a bathroom break." I know that you, Dave, took so many bathroom breaks when you worked at Amazon. You were taking them like 3 per hour and sometimes spending 15 minutes in the bathroom and getting away with it the whole time. But the managers are much stricter at my warehouse. And so I'm not able to do what you were able to do, Dave, you asshole. Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that message. That was a good one. There's another one coming through right now. This is Anne. She's currently working on the farm. She is working on getting some new beds seated, and so she's got gloves on, and she's like down there in the thick of it. And so she just wanted to let everybody knows that she loves this and she thinks it's really great. Yeah, thanks, Anne. Great transmission. Anyone else have any telepathic messages they want to shoot my way? There's too many for me to read right now, but yeah, what? David, are you here now? Were you able to pull it up?
Yeah. Yeah, I got it.
All right, I shared screen share to you, so you should be able to pull that up now. There we go. No, not working.
I just hit it. Is it not coming up?
There we go. It's coming up now.
Okay,
There we
sweet.
go. There we go. Nice, nice. Let me pull it up kind of the way I had it before. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So the name of this book. Could you tell us a couple things about this book, and then we'll just dive into it?
So Crazy Talk, Stupid Talk was brought to my attention by Lance Straight, who was one of his students that I spoke to once about, I was getting into Neil Postman. I had just found out, that he had way more stuff than amusing ourselves to death. And he kind of mentioned that if you really want to get into it, a good first step would be Crazy Talk, Stupid Talk. It's basically him explaining kind of like the importance of the semantic environment. Um, One of the examples he gives, Lance Straight gives for the importance of it is the semantic environment in amusing ourselves to death would be the public discourse, and then sub environments would be like the chapters within it, like religion, politics, um, what else, the news, and those types of things. So then here he kind of goes into like very, very detailed descriptions of what the semantic environment is, the purposes that people have within those, the content within those environments. And then part two of that will be kind of like these little examples that he gives of examples of crazy talk and stupid talk. So basically the stupid talk would be kind of like talk that kind of doesn't achieve its purposes in the sense that it doesn't make sense. Like maybe you're on a date and a girl says, look how beautiful the sunset is, and you say something like, no, actually it's not sunsetting, it's actually we're rotating around the sun is what's really happening. So it's kind of like, okay, dude, you're kind of missing the point here. Where crazy talk has more of a sinister kind of objective of maybe even just kind of like scrambling the conversation so that nothing gets done, but you know exactly what you're kind of doing, which is kind of closely related to, I forget the other dude's name that wrote that book on bullshit.
Yeah, I
Frankfurt,
remember
I think his name on
Frankfurt. Yeah, yeah,
bullshit.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It is
Yeah.
just like that. Yeah. Does he actually reference Frankfurt, or was this before that?
This was in I think 1969, so I'm not sure when the Frankfurt one was written. Actually, this is 1976 at least here, and then this Frankfurt one was, I love how tiny this book is. This was in 19, oh, Harry Frankfurt, oh bullshit, 1929. Yeah, I don't know when this one was published. It says 2005 on
Cool.
here.
No, cool.
But yeah,
Like,
he definitely doesn't reference it, but it definitely rhymes for sure.
it totally does. Yeah. So basically, crazy talk is like Frankfurt's bullshit, and then stupid talk sounds like autistic talk. You know, and I know that some people will think that what I just said is very ableist, but as a person who is probably on the spectrum, let's just say, there, and let's be honest, a lot of people are on the spectrum because they spend a lot of time on the internet. But also, there is a sort of sense in which the media environment itself and ways of not being aware of certain things might make it so you feel like or behave in such a way so as that people will either see you on the spectrum or you kind of see yourself on the spectrum. And so there's this kind of stupid talk that he's talking about where it's like, yeah, a little self-awareness can go a long way for a person, and that's why I think it's very important, right? So the problem with calling someone an idiot from the Bourdieu approach is that there's a big difference between classifications done by an institution and classifications done by an individual. And when an individual gives a classification like you're an idiot, well, any individual can just give that right back to you. You don't have the authority, the legitimacy, the institutional backing to pronounce people idiotic in such a way that it actually carries real world effects. You're just a person with an opinion, and everybody gets to have an opinion, right? And so it can always get turned right back on you when you're in that kind of world, just on the street. It's kind of just like, well, you know, you're taking the risk of people just turning it right back at you, right? But now we're going to get a little deeper into a different way of thinking about stupid talk and crazy talk. And we'll just begin reading the very first part here. If you want to get it to the part, I'll read the first like couple paragraphs, and then I'm going to step away while I listen.
Okay. You mean the first part right here, the semantic environment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to jump ahead to something else, because you might have, or do you want to read the forward?
Yeah, let's do the forward actually. Let's do
Let's
the
do the
forward, and then
forward.
maybe we could jump around. Yeah.
Sweet. All right.
Here we go.
You know what? Yeah, I'm down to do anything in this book with you. And so if you have any sort of predilection to go in some direction, let's do it. But I'll just take it from the top.
Go for it.
This book is about talk. Not every kind of talk, but the kind which I think is it useful and virtuous to expose as crazy or stupid. I do not believe there exists a technical definition of either of these accusations, but if there does, I am not using it here. Stupid talk, as I mean the phrase, is talk that has, among other difficulties, a confused direction or an inappropriate tone or a vocabulary not well suited to its context. It is talk, therefore, that does not and cannot achieve its purposes. To accuse people of stupid talk is to accuse them of using language ineffectively, of having made harmful but correctable mistakes in performance. It is a serious matter, but not usually dreadful. Crazy talk is something else, and is almost always dreadful. As I will use the phrase, crazy talk is talk that may be entirely effective, but which has unreasonable or evil or sometimes overwhelmingly trivial purposes. It is talk that creates an irrational context for itself or sustains an irrational conception of human interaction. It, too, is correctable, but only by improving our values, not our competence. What I'm investigating in this book is how, through lack of knowledge, awareness, or discipline, we frequently talk both crazy and stupid and thereby create mischief and pain. The purpose of the book is to indicate how we can reduce such talk to tolerable levels so that our verbal behavior will not be an excessive burden to ourselves and others.
This is no easy matter to do. The subject is filled with complexity, contradiction, and general confusion. For example, on the day I am writing these words, there is a story in the newspapers about the late J. Edgar Hoover. It informs us that Hoover's car was once struck from behind while it was making a left turn. As a consequence, Hoover forbade all left turns on any of his automobile trips, including trips of several hundred miles. Assuming the political pun to be irrelevant here, how could one have persuaded Mr. Hoover that there was something wrong with the way he had formulated his problem? Do you suppose it would have made a difference if someone had explained to him that cars do not make left turns, only drivers do, and that one bad turn does not foretell another, or that the usual 10-minute trip from the FBI building to his favorite Washington restaurant would, under his rules, now take him through Norwalk, Connecticut? I doubt it, and for a few reasons. The first is that the process of anthropomorphizing, of attributing human qualities to inanimate objects, such as cars, is a very difficult speech habit to break. It is more than likely that Hoover was partial to this habit and would have found it easy to eliminate from his strategies for thinking. The second is that we are all somewhat in love with our ways of talking about the world, whatever deformities such talk might have. And it takes some doing to convince any of us that our favorite sentences often betray our interests. But even more important, on what grounds could we argue that our sense of the problem is more legitimate than his? Hoover, obviously, thought his problem was cars that make left turns. We can see, I assume, that his problem had to do with directions of thinking/talking, not turning. What is the standard which gives us the authority to instruct him? Who is to say which of us is seeing the matter correctly? You'll be pleased to know that there are standards by which to judge these matters, and if I have done this book right, these will be visible to you before long. Meanwhile, here is another sort of problem of the type to which we have to address ourselves. A few years ago, Richard Nixon put forward a man by the name of Clement Haynsworth to fill a vacancy in the Supreme Court. It was agreed by everyone that Haynsworth was in every sense a mediocre candidate. He had certainly been a mediocre lawyer and judge. In arguing for Haynsworth's appointment, Roman Hruska, presently Senator of Nebraska, remarked with serious intent that since there are so many mediocre people in America, they were entitled to be represented by a mediocre Supreme Court justice. Nice.
That's amazing. That's ballsy. I kind of feel like people almost were thinking that with Kamala Harris. And I feel like people also kind of think that with Donald Trump. It's like, well, we live in a crazy clown world, so if we have a reality TV star as president, it's totally justified because, we live in a crazy clown world. And then people are on the other side like, okay, well, we're all stupid bureaucratic functionaries, so who cares if she doesn't actually, have any real qualifications or any of the riz necessary for the job,
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Trump talks just like us, so he knows. He knows where we're coming from.
Now, what sentence starts the next one? Is it in any
now
case?
this.
Now this application.
Now this. Yeah.
That's funny from him, right?
Yeah. Now this. Who would have known? Years
Now
later.
Now this application of the language of representative government has many rich possibilities, one might argue. For example, that America needs mediocre brain surgeons to operate on all those people with mediocre brains. Or Richard Nixon, on the basis of this sort of reasoning, could have defended himself by arguing that since there are so many criminals in America, they deserve to be represented by a president who is himself a criminal. In any case, and by the way, I think that is like the sociological way of thinking, that sort of defaults to averages and talking about human nature in reference to the average, where you're like, people are like this. I used to have a friend who would always say, women are like this, women are like that. Oh, well, Dave, that's great for you. Anne's amazing, but most women are like this. They only want a guy who's got nice cars and lots of money, and just doing this thing where you're appealing to some vulgar average as opposed to exemplars and ideals, right? Like the president as a representative is supposed to be an actual exemplar, an actual ideal. He's supposed to serve ideals, right? And and then what we do when we make these kind of appeals to the norm, to the average, to the vulgar, we're actually lowering the bar for everyone, which is just, it's kind of like when you start grading on the curve in the classroom. It's like a similar effect, and sociology is most guilty for doing this to us. In any case, I think you can see that this type of thinking can generate a considerable amount of stupid talk. Is there any way to change Senator Hruska's point of view by making him more aware of his language? I think there is. Our language structures the very way we see. And any significant change, our language structures the very way we see, and any significant change in our ways of talking can lead to a change in point of view. Nonetheless, stupid and crazy talk is a large and even mysterious subject, and one has to approach it with a proper respect for the idiosyncrasies of human perception. With this in mind, I intend to show how one may proceed in approaching the subject, what questions need to be asked, what considerations must be given, what criteria may reasonably be used to avoid the mismanagement of our thinking, talking. Obviously, then, there's a question you will want to have answered before going any further. By what authority do I write such a book? I am, after all, claiming special knowledge in a very broad area of human behavior. I have 5 answers to this question, but only the last of them is any good. The first 3 are, themselves, excellent examples of stupid talk. In order, here they are. I am a professor of communication at New York University. I have written previously on this subject. I have been given awards testifying that I know what I am talking about. This one was suggested to me by the Wizard of Oz. So I guess in the Wizard of Oz, somebody thinks that they are able to speak on things because they've been given awards for speaking on those things. Is that, yeah?
Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Yeah, I guess. I didn't know either. Now I want to read the original, which is an American classic. The fourth is not quite so obviously stupid, although it is far from convincing. I have spent 15 years making system, and by the way, not just an American classic. The Wizard of Oz is actually an American populist classic. It actually comes from the 1870s era of OG American populism. And I keep stipulating American because in the world of theory, the word populism is used the way that Slavoj Zizek uses it, which has nothing to do with where the term actually comes from. And it has very little to do with that book by Mouffe and thinker whose name is escaping me. It doesn't matter. Those guys are not using the term right. You got to read Thomas Frank to get the history of populism. And people will look to previous eras throughout history and talk about this populist moment, that populist moment, but they are usually completely out of touch with what it actually means in America. And the term comes from the 1870s. And it's very convenient that people forget this history because it was a giant working class movement against Democrats and Republicans. And today, it's very popular for Democrats and Republicans to be anti-populist or to be pseudo-populists. And the easiest way to be pseudo or anti-populist is to have no idea what it actually means. But we are over here practicing it ourselves. We're practicing it whenever we say we have the right to read things on our own and to talk about them. All right. That was like the essential thing going on back then, was saying we're not represented by these people on the East Coast. We're not represented by our politicians. We're not represented by this system. And the people who are supposedly the experts don't really understand what we're dealing with. They're not really able to speak to our needs. And so we're going to have to just educate ourselves. And that's where populism comes from. That is the spirit of populism in its more noble sense. And so people like to attack the vulgar sense. And they usually do this by reference to somebody like Trump. But they're not thinking. They're simply not thinking. In fact, they're probably doing stupid talk. Anyway, so the fourth is not quite so obviously stupid, although it is far more convincing. I have spent 15 years making systematic observations of how people talk and trying to explain to myself why talk so often confounds our purposes. Please note the nature of the question I have been asking. I have not been trying to find out what intelligent talk is. I have been trying to find out what dumb talk is. In this respect, I have modeled my inquiries after those of doctors and lawyers. What is the first question a doctor or a lawyer will ask you when you seek his or her advice? It is something like, what's the trouble? Even the wisest of them cannot tell you what good health is or what justice is. They can only say what bad health is and whether or not an injustice has been done. We might even say that to a doctor, good health is the absence of bad health. To a lawyer, justice is the absence of injustice. Some people say that this is not the right way to look at the matter, and perhaps they are correct. But I know very few people who will consult a doctor to get an opinion on what is good health. And I know very fewer who will approach a lawyer to find out what justice is. In any case, in my own inquiries into talk, I have discovered that the varieties of effective purpose-enhancing talk are so diverse and unpredictable as to defy classification. Not so the varieties of destructive talk. Not so the varieties of destructive talk. Like illnesses and inquiries, they are identifiable. Their properties are discussable, and I have reason to believe that within limits, they are reducible. Just want to say that there's a sort of way of thinking like Tolstoy, that every functional family, or he says that every dysfunctional family is different, but every good family is the same, or something like that. Someone could maybe pull the actual quote for me, but this is kind of saying the opposite. It's like, no, we can quite easily classify stupid and crazy talk. It's a lot harder to talk about the good kinds of talk, right? Because I think this is going to be a big part of it, is, context and aim is going to be so important here.
Yeah, I think with the example of I don't know how to fly a helicopter, but if it flies into a tree, I could tell something went wrong. That that work?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. I don't know how to fly a helicopter, but I know that that ain't how you do it, right?
All right, here we go. Which leads me to the fifth and final answer to the question, by what authority do I write this book? The answer is the book itself. If you find that its perspective is usable in helping you manage your language affairs, then for you, the book may be considered authoritative and its author an authority. If you do not find it so, then there is no help for me. My professorship, previous writings, awards, and research will not protect me from the charge that I have wasted your time. But assuming you find the book useful, there is still another question you might want answered before going on. What is the theoretical basis of my approach to the problem? There are, of course, no chairs to the study of stupid talk in our universities, and no one has ever received a Nobel Prize for uncovering the underlying structure of crazy talk. Perhaps someday crazy talk and stupid talk will be considered important enough to make into a subject in our schools. Let us say, at least as important as public speaking and business administration or Elizabethan non-dramatic literature. Meanwhile, those of us interested in the matter must find our ideas wherever we can. In my case, this has meant turning to people such as Karl Popper, George Herbert Mead, Alfred Korzybski, A.I. Richards, George Orwell, Lewis Mumford, Gregory Bateson, Wendell Johnson, Kenneth Burke, and Saul Alinsky. I think Daniel Gardner just had a book come out talking a lot about Albert Korzybski. Um, but anyway, you may be relieved to know I have not cluttered the text with elaborate explanations of how I am using their ideas, especially since I no longer know what I have taken from them. I do, however, and most emphatically, relieve them of all responsibility for such stupidities as you may find in the text. And speaking of the text, you may find it useful to know that it is divided into three parts. In part one, I try to put forward the general framework of the problem, including toward the end a relatively clear distinction between crazy talk and stupid talk. Part two consists of 17 small chapters, each of which identifies and tries to explain a particular characteristic of such talk. These characteristics include certain beliefs, speech habits, and structural aspects of language, which, if not carefully controlled, lead us into talking crazy or stupid. Part 3 is a single chapter in which I try to suggest a point of view we may adopt, which, it seems to me, will help us to keep well clear of such talk. Finally, this is probably the place for me to clarify a certain semantic point which, if left murky, may cause trouble. Several writers have pointed out that roughly 1/3 of all the verbs we use in normal discourse are some form of the verb to be, and further, that there are some forms of it that are exceedingly cunning in confounding our understanding. One of these is sometimes called the is of projection, as in the sentence, he is stupid. What is mysterious about this sentence is that, through a kind of grammatical alchemy, it creates the impression that stupidity is an innate property of whomever you are talking about. Like, for example, the person's height or weight or eye color. But stupidity is no such thing. It is a behavior done at a particular time and in a particular circumstance, and in particular circumstances. This means that in discussing stupidity, we are not talking about those who have it and those who don't. We are talking about the ways in which people do stupidity. One can even do stupidity or craziness on purpose in order to achieve certain rational ends. For example, I have seen men in the army go into well-practiced, stupid routines in order to avoid being chosen for odious tasks. I have also seen both men and women do the same and for the same reason in domestic settings, and it is by no means rare for a child to do this in school. Paul Goodman called this reactive stupidity. But in these cases, the doer has himself under control. Okay, yeah. But in these cases, the doer has himself under control. It is the situation that is out of control, out of his control. What I mean by control is a thorough awareness of what is going on in a situation, including your own responses to it. But what we are concerned with in this book is doing stupidity and craziness when it is not what you intended, or if it is, doing it with hideous consequences to someone else. Nice.
Beautiful. Good. Well done.
Nice, thanks. Let's see. So now, do you want to jump into like the beginning here, or do you want to jump into one of the examples? I think it might be best to jump into one of the examples and then maybe jump back to kind of like the intro.
Yeah, let's jump into an example for sure. Let's do that right after this. TU is building a studio. I have officially cleared ground. I've been working on it for the last several months on and off, but am, as of this last week, beginning to get a lot more traction on the project because more money has come in. So thank you so much for those who have already contributed via donations for the TU studio. It's going to happen no matter what, but the question is when. If you want to help speed up the process, make things smoother sailing, and help me keep creating the kinds of content that you love, and even better, the kinds of content that is to come. There's a whole new era getting rolled out. If you want to help make it possible and usher it in smoother and faster, the best way to do that is to make a donation via the Zelle link up on the screen here. You see that QR code? Use that QR code. Once you have an account, that QR code should take you to where you can make the bank transfer with zero charge, which is really sweet, huh? Yeah, we love that. That's why we're using Zelle. Thank you so much for helping make this possible.
Like the propaganda.
All right, we're back.
All right, let's do propaganda. 167.
Yeah, let's get into propaganda, everybody.
All right.
It's actually one of
the
the things that really turned me off to the existing theory scene so strongly was the degree to which people just embrace that like this idea that everything's propaganda. It actually became like, I just realized that there's a lot of people who think that what it is to do theory is just basically rationalizing propaganda with bigger words, right? And it's a kind of brainwashing. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see what he's got to say about it.
Yeah, I find it helpful. I think it's a good one. And he goes at Aldous Huxley a little bit too, which is nice to see because he loves Aldous Huxley. So, why not go at him a little bit?
Oh, I have this up, so I'm going to go ahead and show it. If you're wondering what kind of food we're going to have at the retreat, I was talking about the retreat a little earlier today. I am now sharing on the screen here an image that you're not able to see, David. But if you simply look at the stream, you'll be able to see it that way. Because I know you're doing a screen share. I don't want to have to mess that up. So yeah, just take a peek there. And what you see is a lot of delicious looking food. 80% of it is made here from food grown on the farm that is better than organic, meaning no chemicals, no till. It's all made with love. And it's super nutrient dense food. And so we've got cowboy caviar, we've got salad, we've got chicken skewers. There'll be a vegan version of all of this, as well as hamburgers with locally sourced grass-fed beef. The chicken is straight from here on the farm. Those berries, those blackberries and those raspberries, so good. I've been eating handfuls of them every day. Those flowers you see right there, those sweet peas, are the best smelling flowers I've ever smelled in my entire life. And then these little like crumble square delicious treat things. These are Huckleberry Saskatoon fusion. So a huckleberry is a bright, slightly tangy, very sweet berry, kind of like a blueberry that grows wildly out here in the Pacific Northwest. It's a very expensive rarity because you have to go up into the mountains to pick it usually, and it's hard to find a good spot. And they don't come they're very expensive, is what I'm trying to say. So huckleberries, but with Saskatoons as well, which is a Native American classic. It was like the go-to berry. It's a superfood, and so Anne has curated this menu for an event that's happening here on the farm this Saturday. If you are local to the area, you can register via the QR code on the screen. Though I don't expect that anybody watching this is actually thinking that they'll be able to attend. I'm just putting it out there, though. It is public. You totally can. And the main reason I'm showing this, though, is not to try to recruit people to come this weekend, but so that you know one of the things we'll be doing at the retreat here on September 27th is actually another one of these. And so you get to do all kinds of stuff that relates to theory while you're here. Also, you get to do stuff that relates to homesteading and homeschool and this sort of meta conversation about how those worlds can intersect and how we can collaborate with one another. And also about this next era that we're moving into. But also, we'll be doing some stuff where we get to interface with the public. And this will be one of those things, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So get excited about the delicious food. And I wasn't going to make this plug, but I saw it was up on Photoshop when I was trying to close Photoshop. And I was like, well, you know what? I might as well make the plug. And therefore, I'm going to assume that I needed to talk about this. Somebody watching this right now probably needed to see this or think about it for some reason. 80% from the farm, 20% locally sourced. That's how we get all of this better than organic, delicious food to you. So come have a bite.
What was that on the bottom right, Dave? I kind of lost myself there staring at that. What is that?
What was what?
They look the one on the bottom right. They look like kind of like little cookies filled with something.
Oh yeah, those are the Huckleberry Saskatoon fusion crumble squares.
Wow, that looks
Yeah.
good. All
Dude,
right.
they're bomb. I can't tell you how excited I am about the jams. Today I'm making blackberry jam, blackberry Saskatoon jam, blueberry jam, blueberry Saskatoon jam, huckleberry jam, and huckleberry Saskatoon jam. I'm making all these different jams that I sell at the market. And this is all just like, I'm just self-motivated right now to do it. Anne showed me how easy it is to do. And now that I know, it's like, you can grow berries and then sell them direct as berries, and then people will buy them and eat them on the spot. And that's a great thing to do, but you don't get nearly as much money and they don't last as long. And so if you make a jam out of it, you make more money, it lasts longer, and it's fun and then delicious. And then it's like if you slightly water it down or make it slightly looser, more spreadable, it's a jam. But if it's slightly thicker, it's a compote that you can put on pancakes or waffles. Oh, so good. So freaking good, man. Yeah.
Oh man, I'm a little overwhelmed. That sounds good.
DeathCon in the chat said, "What the fuck is this, a baking channel now?" Yeah, that's right. Get hungry.
Nice.
All right, let's get after it.
Let's do it. All right. So I think this is a good chapter to kind of bounce to real quick to get a nice example. So it's propaganda. Of all the words we use to talk about talk, propaganda is perhaps the most mischievous. The essential problems its uses pose. Damn, this is a tough one. The essential problems its use poses and never resolves are reflected in the following definition given by no less a personage than the late Aldous Huxley. There are two kinds of propaganda: rational propaganda in favor of action that is consonant with the enlightened self-interest of those who make it and those whom it is addressed, and
To whom?
non-rational propaganda that is not consonant with anybody's enlightened self-interest, but is dictated by and appeals to passion. This definition is, of course, filled with confusion and even nonsense, both of which are uncharacteristic of Huxley and only going to show how propaganda can bring the best of us down.
Mm.
To begin with, Huxley makes a distinction between good and bad propaganda on the basis of the cause being espoused. If what we are told is good for everybody, then propaganda is rational. If it is bad for everybody, it is non-rational. But how are we to know what is good and what is bad for everybody? In most instances, this is far from self-evident, and not even Aldous Huxley can say for sure what is enlightened and what is not. Moreover, the information we might need to decide the issue is often not available to us. Suppose, for example, a television commercial tells us that a certain drug will help to relieve nagging backaches. That would appear to be in everybody's self-interest, thus rational propaganda. But let us also suppose that it is later discovered that in addition to relieving nagging backaches, the drug also relieves you of a healthy liver. Was the commercial good propaganda at the time you heard it, or was it bad? Perhaps it was good when you heard it, but became bad when you learned the drug's side effects. But if it was never in anybody's self-interest to use the drug, then wasn't the commercial bad propaganda to begin with?
Mm.
And now
And
let
now,
us suppose that
yeah, I'll take it for a few.
Oh, go for it.
And now let us
Go for it.
suppose that in combination with another substance, the drug is rendered harmless to your liver. Will a commercial for the drug with secret formula Xology added now be good propaganda? Then suppose, well, you can begin to see the problems here. But they are simple ones compared to those raised by a television commercial which tells us to vote for a political candidate. How would we know before the candidate is elected if it is in everybody's self-interest to vote for him? Indeed, how would we know a year after his election if it has been in everybody's self-interest? People continually disagree over such matters, and we would be left with a definition of propaganda that says, what I think has been good for me is rational. What you think has been good for you is non-rational. But Huxley does give us a hint. Wait, what you think has been good for you is non-rational. Okay, but Huxley does not give us a hint, although oh my God. But Huxley does give us a hint, although a misleading one, of how we may resolve the problem. He says that non-rational propaganda appeals to passion. He says nothing about the type of appeal made by rational propaganda, but we may assume he believes it appeals to the intellect. Here Huxley has, of course, moved to another ground and is offering a definition based on the type of appeal, not the goodness or badness of the cause. But as he has it here, this shift only results in more confusion. What do we say of propaganda that appeals to our passions, but in an enlightened cause? And what of propaganda that appeals to our intellect, but for a cause that is not consonant with everybody's enlightened self-interest? There are two possible ways out of this dilemma, as far as I can see. The first is to stop using the word propaganda altogether. Huxley himself seems to suggest this in another part of the book, from which I earlier quoted. He says, in regard to propaganda, the earlier advocates of universal literacy and a free press envisaged only two possibilities. The propaganda might be true or it might be false. They did not foresee what in fact has happened. Oh, okay, so that was the two possibilities, that the propaganda is either true or false. They did not foresee what in fact happened. The development of a mass communications industry concerned in the main neither with the true nor the false, but with the unreal, the more or less totally irrelevant. End quote. I infer from this passage that Huxley does not quite know how to classify totally irrelevant messages except to say that they are non-rational because they distract people from seeing the truth. Of course, they also distract people from seeing falsehoods. And perhaps on that account, Huxley might think, as I do, that the word propaganda causes more misunderstanding than it resolves. I'll read one last paragraph here. But if the word is to remain with us, then I suggest we pick up on one of Huxley's ideas and use propaganda to refer not to the goodness or badness of causes, but exclusively to a use of language designed to evoke a particular kind of response. We might say, for example, that propaganda is language that invites us to respond emotionally, emphatically, more or less immediately, and in an either or manner. It is distinct from language which stimulates curiosity, reveals its assumptions, causes us to ask questions, invites us to seek further information, and to search for error. From this perspective, we eliminate the need to distinguish between good and bad propaganda, except in the sense that good propaganda works and bad doesn't. We eliminate the need to focus on causes and actions and the precarious issue of which ones are in whose enlightened self-interest. And we eliminate the need, which thankfully Huxley does not bring up, but which others have, to distinguish between language that persuades and language that doesn't. Since all language is purposive, even, I am told, the language of paranoid schizophrenics, well, I'll be damned, dead men do bleed. We can assume that talking is always intended as some form of persuasion. I don't know what that was a reference to, but he was making some kind of a reference to something. Thus the distinction.
I could jump in and
Yeah, you know it?
yeah, that was basically he had there was a patient that was convinced that he was dead, and they thought that they would ask him, okay, so if you're dead, tell us something. Do dead people bleed? And he said, no, they don't bleed. And then they decided, okay, so we're gonna cut you. And then he bled, and they said, so what do you think now? And he says, oh shit, look at that, dead men do bleed. So it
Ah.
didn't,
Oh, that's great.
yeah, it didn't have the, yeah.
No, thank you. I'm glad you jumped in. That's perfect. Does he talk about that earlier in this book?
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Thus, the distinction between persuasion and other types of talking does not seem to be very useful, but the distinction between language that says believe this and language that says consider this is, in my opinion, certainly worth making, and especially because the techniques of saying believe this are so various and sophisticated. Here, for example, are two pieces of propaganda according to the way in which I have defined the word. The first is of a fairly obvious species, and I think 3 short paragraphs of it will be about all you can take. It was published in the Indianapolis Star in 1968, about the time the Vietnam War was heating up, and was called A Letter from a War Veteran. I'll read that quote and then you can take it away. It was too bad I had to die in another country. The United States is so wonderful, but at least I died for a reason, and a good one. I may not understand this war, or like it, or want to fight it, but nevertheless, I had to do it, and I did. I died for the people of the United States. I died really for you. You were my one real happiness. I died also for your mom and dad so that they could go on working, for your brothers so that they could play sports in freedom without communist rule.
It goes on like this for several paragraphs, in the course of which God comes into the picture along with Dad's retirement, vacations, and several other surefire winners. There is, in my opinion, not much to say of interest about this piece of propaganda because it is so obviously constructed to evoke Indianapolis passions in favor of the war. This is not to say that there were no arguments for waging the war, only that no arguments were presented here in any form, and there is no pretense that there are. The rhetorical devices are, so to speak, all up front, and I confess to a certain admiration for the boldness of their sentimentality. Even the admin on Madison Avenue would be ashamed to try to pull this off, and I can't help thinking that there must be something very curious going on in Indiana if this could be done as late as 1968. I mean, I think this could still be done now. But anyway,
Mhm.
but the next species of propaganda is another matter. In fact, perhaps in a special way, it illuminates the difference between Indiana stupid talk and New York stupid talk. This one was widely circulated among intellectuals in New York City when it was the fashion to elevate revolutionaries to sainthood. The propaganda was intended to give us some background information on George Jackson, who was for a time a charismatic leader in the movement for Black liberation. We are informed that Jackson was a choir boy, that his father was a post office employee, and that Jackson subscribed to conventional values when he was young. We are also told that the circumstances of Jackson's first serious crimes were these. One night, a friend whom Jackson had invited for a ride in his car ordered him to stop at a gas station. The friend went inside and stole $70, then told Jackson to drive away. Although Jackson was convicted for robbery, we are led to believe that he was entirely innocent. The following paragraph, telling of Jackson's early life, was included in the piece as part of the background information. When Jackson was 15, still too young to drive legally, he had a slight accident in his father's car, knocking a few bricks out of the outside wall of a small grocery store near his home. His father paid the damages. The store owner refrained from pressing charges, but he was still sent to reform school for driving without a license. 3 years later, shortly after his release from reform school, he made a down payment on a motorbike, which turned out to have been stolen. His mother had the receipt and produced it for the police, but Jackson was sent back to reform school, this time for theft. I believe this paragraph is one of the great propagandistic passages of all time, and deserving of being included in the Joseph Goebbels casebook of famous boondoggles. Let us do a small explication of it. When Jackson was
Wait. I want to look.
15, yeah,
I want to look that up. Is that actually a book?
I
The
don't know.
Joseph. Scroll back. The Joseph
Yeah,
Goebbels. Uh, I don't think it's real.
casebook.
I don't think that's
Yeah,
real, but I think he's just joking. But let's see. No, it's not a book. Okay, just making sure.
okay.
He's got a sense of humor. All right, let's keep going.
He does, he does. When Jackson was 15, still too young to drive legally. Well, now, what does this imply? That Jackson was a competent driver, but the laws governing these matters are unreasonable. Why not? Still too young to drive. Who or what is in need of correction here, Jackson or the Motor Vehicle Bureau? Then the quote goes on. He had a slight accident in his father's car, knocking a few bricks out of the outside of a small grocery store near his home. The diminutives are almost oppressive. A slight accident, a few bricks, a small grocery store. One almost expects to read that someone's trivial leg was barely fractured. And what and what is a slight accident anyway? Dislodging even a few bricks from an outside wall. It wasn't for God's sakes an inside wall. Doesn't sound awfully slight to me. And why are we told it was near his home? Are we led to believe that he had only driven around the block?
Yeah.
Yeah. I like how he goes into this whole thing in almost detail. Best of all is the phrase in his father's car. Does this imply that George really had nothing to do with the accident? That it happened to him while he was innocently sitting in his father's car? Why not? He had a slight accident when he stole his father's car? Or did George's father approve of his taking the car? His father paid the damages, the store owner refrained from pressing charges, but he was still sent to reform school for driving without a license. The still is a wonderful piece of propaganda here. It leads us to believe that everything had been settled to everyone's satisfaction, but that the police and the courts were simply being vindictive. After all, it was a small crime, and George was a choir boy. Why the big deal?
I just want to say, like right there, it's like, yeah, well, without having a lot more of the context, we don't know. Like, that could have all been a part of the plea deal, right? It could have been like the store owner wanted to press charges, but then was like, okay, well, if you'll at least go to reform school, then I won't. I don't want to ruin his life, but I want something to change. You know what I mean? Like, we just don't have those details. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great example of the context that we don't have. That's true. Okay, so the quote, he continues on. I think this is the last bit of the quote. No, he has a little bit more. Okay. This is the second to last one. So 3 years later, shortly after his release from reform school, he made a down payment on her motorbike, which turned out to have been stolen. First of all, I'd like to know how shortly after his release. It sounds as if George was in reform school for almost 3 years. Is this true? And why is the information being kept from me? Second, the word down payment is simply marvelous. It conjures an image of a responsible businessman engaged in a wholly legitimate transaction. But George obviously didn't buy the bike at Macy's. He must have bought it from someone on the streets who was giving him a real bargain. But the turned out to be stolen suggests that choir boy George never suspected, not even for a moment, that anyone could traffic in stolen property. Where did George grow up? In Beverly Hills? His mother had the receipt and produced it for the police, but Jackson was sent back to reform school, this time for theft.
I'll go. The implication here.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, do it. Yep.
The implication here is that the evidence George's mother produced should have been enough for any reasonable policeman. But apparently it wasn't. What was the evidence against George? Was he convicted of theft without a trial? What did the police have to say at the trial? We are told nothing, left with the impression that George was possibly framed and certainly the victim of a system that was out to get him.
Let me stress, in case you have gotten the wrong impression, that I do not know much about the late George Jackson, and most of what I do know evokes my admiration. What I am talking about is a method of propagandizing which attempts to conceal itself as information. The response that is asked for here is, believe this. You are being given all the information you need to know. But I can sooner believe that a soldier would go to war for mom's apple pie than that a friend of George invited him for a ride, ordered him to stop at a gas station, held up the place, and told him to drive away, while all the time George thought his friend was only going to the bathroom. I would guess that you couldn't get away with that kind of stuff in Indianapolis. In New York, it's easy. And I just want to say, part of why this matters to me is because the post-class fractured mass being a time without canon, being a time where we can't really know our neighbors or know what it is that we're a part of, being in the midst of so many media revolutions, having such a hard time to find context for anything. Everybody's aware that there's fake news all around them. The question is, who is doing the fake news, or how, or why? And then people will often do some sort of lesser evilist approach. Well, the mainstream media is so far gone, these people are critical of it, therefore they must be better, or the opposite, right? Oh, well, at least, these institutions have checks and balances, and sometimes they correct the record when they're wrong. But deeper than people lying, there is the media revolutions themselves that give us just cause to be skeptical, because we are getting, as Postman says, this contorted and disproportionate information to action ratio, where we are being bombarded by stuff that is irrelevant to our daily lives, right? Well, at the same time, the medium that exists for the communication of all information and that has sublated all former media is the internet. And it is something that is sort of existing in this center of a Venn diagram between state and capital. Okay. And so it's right there in the middle, both have this need for us to be legible and predictable. On the one side, so that we can be marketed to, on the other side, so that we can be propagandized. Both are interested in us believing things, but a lot of the time, advertising doesn't work by saying, you should believe that McDonald's is delicious, or that it is the basis for a happy family life. No, it's just about being a part of your horizon of possibilities, and then kind of cultivating associations so that you see images of the M and you think Americana. Like that's ultimately what it's doing, is it's framing your sort of ecosystem, right? It's putting itself in your ecosystem. And with that said, though, we have all these reasons to be distrustful, but then people who write like this, who openly or expressly or obviously are utilizing all of these manipulative approaches to trying to just get you to see things a certain way, they'll justify it by saying the other side does it too. But the thing is what the reason this matters for people that are either part of the professional managerial class, falling from it, trying to rise to it, or just oriented in reference to it, is that we live in a post-trust era. And this is why. I just touched on what I take to be the major reasons, both at the level of form and also at the level of content. To act like we should trust anything during these times is kind of crazy, right? And so one of the big questions then would be, what are the conditions of possibility for trust in the 21st century, right? Like that's possibly one of the most wicked problems of our times. And I don't trust anybody who thinks that there's an easy solution to it. Definitely not. Each end of the political spectrum has, I suppose, its own favorite style of propaganda. The right tends to prefer gross, straightforward sentimentality. The left, a sort of surface intellectualizing. But it is very important, it seems to me, to note that the response required of us in each instance is a passionate, uncritical acceptance of a point of view. I am not implying, by the way, that there is no legitimate function for propaganda. There are several semantic environments, advertising for example, where it is quite reasonable for one person to ask another to believe what he is saying. In fact, much of our literature, especially popular literature, amounts to a direct appeal to our emotions, to the extent that such appeals are cathartic or entertaining, or in some sense, a stimulus to self-discovery. They are invaluable. In other words, propaganda is not by itself a problem if it comes dressed in its natural clothing. But when it presents itself as something else, regardless of the cause it represents, it is a form of stupid talk that can be, and has been, extremely dangerous. It is dangerous for two reasons. First, propaganda demands a way of responding which can become habitual. If we allow ourselves too easily to summon the emotions that our own causes require, we may be unable to hold them back when confronted with someone else's causes. And second, propaganda has a tendency to work best on groups rather than individuals. It has the effect of turning groups into crowds, which is what Huxley calls herd poisoning. As he describes it, herd poisoning is an active, extroverted drug. The crowd-intoxicated individual escapes from responsibility, intelligence, and morality into a kind of frantic animal mindlessness. Here Huxley is talking about what happens when an individual has joined with other individuals in a semantic environment where propaganda, unchecked, is doing its work. Stupid talk is transformed into an orgy of crazy talk, and the consequences of which can be found in graves stretching from Siberia to Mississippi to Weimar to Peking. This last sentence is, of course, propaganda, pure and simple. But I like it anyway. Folks, we'll be right back right after this. Little of our own. Hate to interrupt, but we would be remiss to not share an advertisement from our sponsors. And we're not sponsored by any corporate or state entities other than ourselves. So I'll just tell you a little bit about some of the past courses and the ongoing courses here at TU. Because if any of them sound exciting to you, well, you can access all of them by becoming a subscriber. That's right, subscribers make all of this possible. Subscribers get access to the course I taught on Martin Heidegger's Being and Time, as well as the course that I taught the first half of last year, Emmanuel Levinas's Totality and Infinity, the second half for which I will be teaching this winter. I've also taught critical media theory and critical doxology and time energy with my wife, Anne Snellgrove McKerracher, who is the co-host on What's Right. Also, you would get access to the course I taught at the university, 3 semesters worth, on Intro to Critical Social Theory and Socioanalysis. But also, we've had lots of other great professors teach Introduction to Marxism by Chris Cutrone, Intro to Lacan via Seminar 11 with Todd McGowan, Introduction to Ivan Illich with Brian Weeks, The Clinical Structures of Psychoanalysis and Autism with Dr. Leon Brenner, the Michael Downs Seminar, Introduction to Slavoj Zizek, Introduction to Nick Land, and Zizek's For They Know Not What They Do, all taught by Michael Downs, as well as What is Sex? There was a collab that I did with Cadell Last. Theory 101, a collab I did with Hello Gorgias. And then also, of course, there's Carl Jaspers' is The Idea of the University, PMC Consciousness and Ideology. These were early, very important courses that I taught with friends at TU back in 2023. And they remain important to this day. Every one of these courses comes out of an overarching research project. There's a real driving force, mission, and agenda to the research going on at TU because we want to understand the situation for the sake of large-scale structural change focused on the good life. What does that actually mean? If you really want to go deep, obviously, these courses are something you could spend the better part of a year binging while at work. Ongoing courses that come out on a monthly basis are the Fundamental Problems and Core Concepts at TU with yours truly, also my seminar, Philosophy of Nature with Nina Power, the Benjamin Studebaker seminar, as well as his course, The 12 Political Theorists. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the line. The only way to make this all possible and really deepen your knowledge and familiarity with all of these different things is to become a subscriber today at http://theoryunderground.com/subscribe. Thank you. All right, we're back.
I don't know, was it?
We're back.
Hey.
We're back. What's up, Internet? What's up, TU? What's up, folks in the chat and people watching this in the future? If you're watching this in the future, go ahead and let us know. I said at the beginning, right before Ruiz had gotten set up here, that if you are busy and you're unable to announce yourself and say hello and say, I don't know, something about the content, that's okay. You can send your messages to me telepathically, and I will then share them here over the channel. So Anne just sent me one, and she said that she's still out there seating beds, right? They were weeding beds, now they're seating beds. Her hands are in gloves and dirty, and so she can't just stop and send a message all the time. So she sent me that one. Evan Wells here in the chat. What's up, Evan? Good to see you. Said hello. Yeah, go ahead and let us know what you're up to. Let us know if you've ever read this book before. If you haven't, let us know what you're thinking. This is sort of part 2 of today's stream. Part 1 was with Bauer, and we were reading from Classification Struggles, this book right here. And we were getting to the question of the idiot. And as a classification strategy, when you start calling people's names, like what are you actually doing? And we started with that, but now I'm here with Ruiz, and what we're doing is reading from Postman's Crazy Talk, Stupid Talk, as you can see on the screen. And we just finished the section on propaganda, and I want to check in with you, David. What are you thinking?
I'm good with either returning to semantic environment or sloganeering is another good one of these little sections that I think is fun too. And considering we're in a very kind of like Twitter world, it seems pretty, or X, whatever. I don't know. But yes, it seems pretty relevant now. And it's another
There's
short one, so.
few things more annoying to me than sloganeering. He did refer to semantic environments a few times, and of course, you know what that means a little bit more, and I think I know what he means by that, but so we could either, that'd be a good context thing, or we could just drive straight into sloganeering. I'm kind of down either way.
All right,
What's the length?
sloganeering.
So sloganeering is on page 192, so it goes for 6 pages. What's the other one? It's 3. Oh, that's a huge one. So let's just do sloganeering and then close out.
All right, let's do it. That's a good one. Let's
Awesome.
go to 198.
And we'll come back. Maybe we'll come back to sloganeer or to semantic environment later. I'd like to couple the semantic environment one with being in the world and what meaning is for Heidegger, because I think it's very important. I think it's very astute. It's definitely better than what you'll get from the sort of French fried German theory that you get through Americans who, like Derrida, Lyotard, or anyone influenced by them, but have no basis in Heidegger, because without him, you end up with a basic Saussurean semiotics, and what you're missing is the equipmental totality, which is so important, and you get that from Division 1 of Being in Time. Without the equipmental totality, I'm sorry, don't talk to me about meaning slippages, right? Meaning slippage, yeah, meaning does slip, and signifiers do slide, and they are also what they are not, and they are in reference to one another, and there is the diachronic and synchronic ways in which the connotations and denotations of words make sense, and that's all very important and true. But if you're not thinking about the ready-to-hand circumspective dealings with equipment and words as equipment that have a basis in actual reality, you're missing the point, kids. And so we'll come back to that, though. Let's just dive into sloganeering here. I'll read the first paragraph and then pass it over.
Go for it.
Maybe it is true and maybe it isn't that battles are won on the playing fields of schools. But certainly something is lost there. For on playing fields and in gymnasiums everywhere, people are encouraged to practice a peculiar variety of stupid talk, which they later on bring to perfection at political rallies and other rituals of mass ecstasy. I'm referring to what I call sloganeering, which, in the wrong semantic environment, can be transformed into an especially lethal form of crazy talk.
Sloganeering consists largely of ritualistic utterances that are intended to communicate solidarity. On Wisconsin would be a typical example. Power to the people would be another. Let's go Mets would be one more. And of course, Sig Heil. Whoa.
I'm gonna sound clip that one, and I'll make a voices PSA. It's like a commercial, and it'll just keep cutting to you, and you'll be saying Sig Heil, and I'll be like, and it'll just be a loop.
Perfect.
So that we're forever canceled. It'll be good. It'll be good.
That's perfect.
No, but
let's see.
I just want to touch on this. This is also true of, like, say, ACAB, right? So you get people who say ACAB or Black Lives Matter, and for them it has a very simple, straightforward meaning that is usually not what it straightforwardly means to the person who's not initiated. And so bread tubers or left tubers spend a lot of time rationalizing really fucking shitty slogans or ways of sloganeering. They spend a lot of time drawing from history and all these different intellectuals to try to build up some great justification for a terrible slogan that basically only means something to the people who are already on your side, and that leave the disenchanted masses further disenchanted. ACAB being a case in point, and Thought Slime as a bread tuber whose name I don't mind pointing out here as a example, is a perfect example. Just go watch his ACAB video essay where he spends the whole time talking about why all cops are bad is actually a great slogan, because actually it doesn't make him think that you actually mean that. It makes him curious and open-minded about what you might mean by that. And then, of course, you find out that it's the system, not the individuals involved, and that individuals can be accepted. Okay. Shut up with your. It's stupid. Could you just stop with stupid slogans? How about that? Now, that's why I care about this, and that's why I wanted to dive into this, is because it is a perfect example of stupid talk. But let's keep going.
Let's do it. It would be shallow to deny that such highly ritualistic sayings and or chantings have some useful social function and may even satisfy a deeply rooted aesthetic need. Children, for example, will frequently indulge in singing slogans at each other. And at religious ceremonies, there are many occasions when the congregation sings, chants, or speaks certain prayers whose power is amplified by the collective recitation. And of course, almost everyone loves a community sing. Apparently, there is something to this form of group talk that is a part of what people call human nature. It is surely one of the principal ways by which we may suppress our individuality and align ourselves wholeheartedly with the community sentiment. One might even say that community consciousness is given its most direct expression through such group performances. If you add to this the aesthetic satisfaction most of us derive from simply saying meaningless sounds like Barney Google with the googly eyes, you can account for the universal practice of group chanting, cheering, and screaming. I do not intend to say, therefore, that in all circumstances such verbal behavior is either stupid or crazy. If Columbia is on the verge of pulling off the upset of the century over Michigan State, provided it can move the ball 3 yards in 4 tries, almost any reasonable man will scream his lungs out in hopes that the gods. I'm sorry. Let's start that one over. If Columbia is on the verge of pulling off the upset of the century over Michigan State, provided it can move the ball 3 yards in 4 tries, almost any reasonable man will scream his lungs out in the hope that the gods which control such matters are also reasonable and will hear. Nonetheless, I do think it is worth remarking, briefly, on the dangers of such behavior. The distance between "Go, go, Lions" and "Off the pigs" is not so great as some people suppose. A man who would say the former is at least a candidate for saying the latter, unless he has matters firmly under control.
And what I was saying is that left tube is basically trying to intellectually launder a difference between these two modes. And it's like, no, they're the same. To say go, go, Lions and off with the pigs or kill the cops or abolish the police is the new version of off the pigs. If you're spending all this time trying to rationalize a stupid slogan that is really chanted in a sport-like manner by people who really are just, sport-brained, you're just helping people with some kind of intellectual disavowal from like what's actually going on. Right? It's so that the intellectual can attend the stupid thing and be like, this is actually not stupid. Right? And it's because you watched some video essay. But in reality, you're still stupid participating in some stupid thing. The first thing then that needs to be stressed is that sloganeering by definition is a repudiation of individual thought. Another example of what Huxley calls herd poisoning. Even when the slogan comes from the mouth of a single person, as when someone says or used to say, "Right on," we are hearing a group speak, not an individual. The purpose of such slogans is to signal that one is a member of a special class of people. This is accomplished by saying exactly what any other member of the group would say. Sometimes this can be very useful in helping you to know what sort of situation you are in. For example, if you should say hello to someone and get a reply such as, "The Lord be with you," or "Power to the people, brother," you will know how to prepare yourself for the next few minutes. Of course, hello is in itself a highly ritualized remark, a slogan, if you will, but it does not commit you to any other classification than that of an English-speaking member of the human race. Moreover, hello, good morning, or any similar expression merely indicates a desire to engage in a civilized transaction. This is all, by the way, what Heidegger is getting at with idle chatter. It does not imply that you adhere to any special religious, political, or social doctrine. The implication is, of course, characteristic of the type of sloganeering I am talking about. By the way, what political language, goalpost moving, sloganeering, and games has resulted in now is that it's very hard to not sort of dog whistle or expose oneself as belonging to an inside or an outside of a group by the words that you choose. And so, I mean, to a certain extent, even just saying cops, usually conservatives do not call them cops, they call them police, right? Or
officers.
Right, or to say person of color. At that point, it's like you are some university-brained fucking person like that. And by the way, anybody who's listening, if you've noticed that we don't say that, you're either a black person, a brown person, you could be Hispanic, you can be whatever. But if you've noticed that we're not out here saying person of color or people of color, it's because that's fucking stupid. I'm sorry, it is just the current fashionable version of colored person. It's the exact same fucking thing, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. Anyway, or BIPOC. That's my favorite one now. But the point is like when people are dropping these kinds of things in their seemingly natural discourse, they're not just saying hello and good morning and using language the way that people use it. There's a political agenda that has co-opted their speech, and if you don't code switch and engage with them in that register, you expose yourself as an outsider, as I just did. And as you would do if you decided to continue on with that kind of speech in this space, which would be technically fine. We could tolerate it. Anyway, same thing goes with when people say, instead of defaulting to he, him, when using the general person, you start saying he or she. That's a progressive move. But now it's not progressive enough. And so everyone's trying to say they, which obviously creates a lot of confusion as well for people who are not initiated into this, because you're like, wait, who? You're talking about an individual or a group? Wait, what? Right. Anyway, he said, that implication is, of course, characteristic of the... I'll reread the last paragraph, though, or a sentence, because it got me there. So he said, moreover, hello, good morning, or any similar expression merely indicates a desire to engage in a civilized transaction. It does not imply that you adhere to any special religious, political, or social doctrine. All the examples I just gave are examples of a specific social doctrine, one that's very niche, academic PMC. That implication is, of course, characteristic of the type of sloganeering I'm talking about. It is a form of groupthink. It says, this is what we believe, not this is what I believe. Or, more precisely, it says, this is what we feel, since most slogans cannot exactly be called beliefs. All power to the people, for example, hardly qualifies as a human thought. Or, if it does, its meaning, as anything but a group marker, is hopelessly muddled. Very few sloganeers who have used this expression could possibly want the people to have all that power, since I would guess a majority of people in this country are opposed to the various causes which such a sloganeer usually favors. Yeah, like the overwhelming majority of people being for some kind of border control. So most people out there saying, a people united will never be divided, or saying power to the people. No, but you don't really want that, though, because that would mean border control, right? Like, and this is why Slavoj Zizek actually takes that and goes, yeah, that's why Angela Merkel, that's why it was not democratic for her to bring in so many immigrants to Germany when she did. But that's also a good reason for people to, especially egalitarians, to not wholeheartedly endorse democracy. And basically what Zizek is saying is, for moral reasons, you might do things that are more authoritarian. Of course, that opens up a can of worms, but it gets at what I'm saying. So anyway, more likely the sloganeer means all power to our people and to hell with the others, which is a thought of sorts and a delightfully candid one at that. But it would not make an entirely satisfactory slogan. It lacks, for example, a sing-song meter. In fact, if you change all power to the people to some obviously meaningless phrase such as all putty to the pee-pee, you can hear how delightful it is, how delightful is its music. Yeah, let's try it. All putty to the pee-pee. Totally. Yeah, we could chant that. We should go downtown and chant this.
It does have a nice ring.
Thus, all power to our people and to hell with the others would not, on aesthetic grounds alone, it would not do. But it also lacks the moral authority that a reputable slogan tries to project. An important characteristic of most slogans is that they will try to convey a high moral stance, as, for example, in free all political prisoners, or keep America beautiful, or make love, not war, or make America great again. I added that one, but keep America beautiful is kind of like that. The moral purity of these, what's that?
It's pretty close.
It's pretty close, yeah. The moral purity of these slogans is achieved mostly through their simplicity, the elimination of all contradiction and ambiguity. To introduce a note of discord, or to suggest that there are those who would suffer at your hands. To introduce a note of discord, or to suggest that there are those who would suffer at your hands, would result in reflection, not fervor. In short, the key to a good slogan is that it makes no distinctions other than the basic one between good guys and bad guys. Slogans, after all, are intended to go beyond our reasoning and penetrate to places where our emotions are stored. What they hope to elicit is an instantaneous response, or what some semanticists call a signal reaction. A signal reaction is what happens when words have lost their referential or symbolic aspect and instead assume the character of religious icons. A good Christian, for example, is not usually expected to inquire into what a crucifix stands for or how it comes to be used, or how it came to be used. In the presence of a crucifix, he is expected to react, to feel, for a crucifix is not exactly a thought, but a catalyst for the release of emotions. In saying this, I am not ridiculing the use of crucifixes or other religious icons. Within the semantic environment of religion, as well as, for example, the theater, signal reactions are entirely necessary and useful. But when the signal reaction becomes the standard method of response in semantic environments where inquiry and complex thought are required, we are not on very dangerous ground. We are on very dangerous ground. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Deutschland über alles is not exactly human language. I think Deutschland über alles would say Germany above all, or Germany over all. It is like the American flag, a command to feel, and we are not expected to ask why, or what does it mean, or where does it come from. Better dead than red, freedom now, liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are icons. whose effect is to reduce the range and power of human insight, which is why I felt so surrounded by religious people during part of the platypus thing, when everybody was just so fixated on the question of the party, the party. The party is clearly, for these people, a religious icon, and as is what they mean, the dictatorship of the proletariat, which is why some people still think it's useful to use the word proletariat, even though all of its semantic contents that were connoted, except for a couple, have lost their footing, which is stuff I go into with my post-class fractured mass thoughts. I did a public seminar, sort of follow-up after the platypus thing, where I went into all of the fundamental things that changed, and nobody has intelligently responded to that yet. Anyway, they imply that certain questions have been settled, or that there was no question to begin with, and that all that is required is collective commitment and passion. I'll read one last one here. As I suggested earlier, the roots of sloganeering doubtless go very deep, and there are few semantic environments in which some form of mindless recitation is not encouraged. Sloganeering is, in fact, practiced in seemingly inexhaustible variety, in pledges, oaths, banners, bumper stickers, college cheers, mantras, wherever it appears desirable to ease the burden of individual responsibility for thinking a matter through.
As a general rule, whenever you find yourself applauding, cheering, or chanting in public spaces, you may suspect that your intelligence has been bypassed, and that someone has raised before your eyes a verbal crucifix. Knowing this, you may wish to applaud, cheer, or chant anyway, on the grounds that it is good for you to let go. Or perhaps you will feel the need to submerge yourself in a collectivized mood. But unless there is some part of you that knows exactly what is happening and which has retained the option to withdraw, you are participating in a fairly dangerous exhibition of stupid talk.
All right, we're going to come back with our closing thoughts right after this. So, welcome to Voices. I just want to say a couple quick little things about what Voices is doing this year, 2025. So, at Theory Underground, there is a way to become involved at the gold or platinum levels, which means that you get more what Benjamin calls bespoke treatment, which is to say a kind of teaching that is dialed in to your particular interests, your particular needs. Gold and platinum subscribers get varying levels of that from Benjamin and from myself. But when you're getting it from me, what does that mean? What does that look like, right? Well, it's in part this Voices project. And that's the provisional title that I've given to this new podcast that I'm doing, for which there is both a public side and a private side. The public side to Voices is what I'm doing with the people you see here on the channel, whereas the private side is what I'm doing with people who are gold or platinum subscribers. And the gold level gets to do one thing per month, and platinum gets to do multiple things per month. And basically, it's not where I'm just going to read and engage like with you on literally anything that you're interested in, because I just can't do that. I tried to do that in academia and it doesn't work. It has to align with my interests, because I have a very hard time focusing on things that are not immediately interesting, right? I think a lot of you ADHD brained kinds of people can probably relate to that, right? If you're deeply invested in it, you're probably able to focus on it, right? So the idea is, with Voices, communing with those voices that have a claim on us or which we would like to claim, right? And so, for instance, Neil Postman is one of those ones that we'd like to claim. We want to keep him alive. We think that he's absolutely essential to our moment, and trying to keep him around and stay in dialogue with him is something that I'm doing with Ruiz, right? But there's a lot of other voices that lay claim on us. And so I'm coming to some of those with Matthew Stanley or I'm not sure where Bourdieu fits in. I'm doing that with Bauer. Where does that really fit in? Both has a claim on us, but also I'd like to claim, right? It's not just, though, that these are people on my canon. It's that you, as you try to think, like, what is your canon? Like, what are the essential texts for you? If your canon overlaps with mine, if there is an overlap, then we should find like a Venn diagram. Where do we meet? And then focus in on that, right? And so if you are especially interested in any of the stuff I've ever talked about on this channel, if any of the stuff that I've ever talked about on this channel either is or might be on your canon, then this might benefit you, and it would definitely benefit me, which is why I'm doing it. I love to do this. This is a lot of fun. It's one of the most fun things you can do with other people, and I hope the fact that I have spent so much time in these various fields and that I have some degree of professional authorization to do this kind of work, as well as so much that I've done outside of the institution, I hope that that actually adds something to it for you. And so if you're interested in any of that, go ahead and become a subscriber at theoryunderground.com/subscribe and go for those higher tiers where I'm able to spend more time with you one-on-one and we'll work through these texts. Sound good? Awesome. Thank you. Peace. We're back, baby. All right.
Right.
Sorry I had to time out somebody from the chat. If they're still watching this, it's not personal, of course. It's just how I'm now thinking about these things. David, that's where you ask me. How are you now thinking about
yeah, you said you're going to
Yeah.
be changing how you treat the comments section, you said, right?
Yeah. We almost
How
talked.
so?
Yeah, we almost talked about this on the back end, my new approach to the comment section. So I'll just say, I see it like a garden of prophilicity. And so, it's technically a place where I can kind of get to meet you. I have met people from the comment sections in real life. So it is a place where you can kind of give me some kind of a sense for a part of your persona ahead of actually meeting you in real life, or ahead of you having some other kind of influence in my life. And that's possible. But that's not the primary thing that is occurring in a live chat that exists because I want you to hype up what we're doing. I don't want you just to hype it up. I do like good questions and sort of summaries of what you're hearing. So if you are hearing Postman saying something, you can say, I think what he's saying is this. Or you could say, is he saying this? Or if David or I say something and you go, are you saying this? I think you said that. Like those kinds of comments are amazing. And that's one of the best reasons to do things live. And that's another thing that is technically possible while we're doing this. Though, of course, there's very rarely that kind of engagement in the live chat, right? The main reason I have a live chat is so that I can have this little poll on it that says that you liked the video. Because if you do, if I put the poll on the live chat, then I'll get way more likes. And if I get way more likes, then this reaches way more people. And it's a simple sort of thing. I want to harness certain tendencies of the attention economy and its algorithms, harness certain ones while countering other ones. And one of the ways that we counter some of the attractors or gravitational sort of forces in the attention economy is by reading. Because it's very easy for people to talk. It's a yapping industry. And what we are doing is modeling reading together and keeping alive the voices of others, not just centering ourselves in talking, which, we'll do as well. But we do counter that prevailing tendency. But what I mean is a garden of prophilicity here, guys, is to say this channel and everything that happens on it is, in a sort of sense, a statement about what TU is up to, what TU values, what we're doing. It is not a public square. It is not a place where freedom and democracy are achieved. It is definitely not an agora over here in the comment section. And realizing that over the last year has been very important. And so some people come in and just want to use it as an opportunity to just say whatever they want. And I can tolerate that to a certain extent, sure. But also, it is kind of like my lawn. Or if I want to be nice and expand it, I can say it's like our lawn. And everything you comment on it is like a sign that you came over and pounded into the grass. And if you come over and you pound in 30 signs within a half hour, and none of them say anything obviously intelligible or relatable to what's going on with the production, I'm gonna fucking nuke you. And it's not personal. It's not personal at all. I don't know what you're going through. So anyway, yeah. Mauro said that they've been learning a lot here. That's awesome. See what I'd leave that signpost in the lawn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm even gonna leave
signposts. You can't even make it to the mailbox.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? You could also leave some that are critical. And I don't leave the critical ones just because I like to engage with critical comments. I also leave them so that people see that I'm the kind of guy who engages with criticism. Do you see? I'm not, because if it was just a real critique that I could engage with, it wouldn't necessarily be on my fucking lawn, would it? But I let it exist on the lawn so people see that I do that. This is prophilicity, pure and simple, which is to say the curation of a profile, the curation of an image, the curation of a sort of personality. So when you think of T, you think of something, right? And so how I engage with the comment section, though it will be sometimes somewhat tyrannical, is, I hope you can see, also principled and theoretically based. So anyway, that's how I try to approach it. Freedom Mind said, sorry, I got totally sucked into that, which was the whole schizo spreading thing that was going on. No. You didn't. You're totally fine. You were doing great. You've been doing great this whole time. Sometimes it's fun to just try to engage with someone who's doing that signposting and be like, what are you doing? Okay, I'll try to engage with it. Is there something going on here? And one of the big indicators that a person is schizo spreading is when they keep saying a lot of things that aren't obviously related to what's going on and are hard to make sense of or not very intelligible. And then someone tries to engage with it and see if there's a there, and that person, the person who's doing the schizo spreading, can't really respond. They can't actually engage back. It's like they're talking, and if you talk to them, they just keep talking, and there is no reciprocity. And when I'm able to see that I have a good faith commenter who tries to engage with that person who's questionably commenting, it's like, that's all I need to know. And I don't consider them to be trolls or bad people. They're just on one, and therefore the timeout function and not the ban.
That's reasonable.
Yeah. All right. So closing thoughts here, man. I'll let you go first. Any sort of thoughts about these last two sections that we read?
I like these two as kind of like, I remember they stuck out to me when I first read this as kind of like, especially the sloganeering one, because it just seems to be kind of like what makes us kind of like what you were saying about how the type of words you use are kind of like, I think I forgot the term you used, dog whistle or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where like if you say something and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's one of those. So it's like, damn, like it feels like it's kind of like those landmines are kind of everywhere that you got to kind of really be careful. And then this chapter kind of like, for me, it kind of opened up to the idea of like, it's definitely a problem. I mean, obviously, intuitively, we could all feel it as though, but I like how he breaks it down as like, at a football game, it's one thing, but if that's how you're having like your political discussions, it's not good. And it seems like, I don't know if it's like a social media thing because of the fact that we try to say things so quickly on these types of forums, but it just seems like our thoughts are just becoming like smaller and smaller and smaller and it's almost most of the time it's not even they don't even say Black Lives Matter, it'll just say BLM, like they just say like
Right.
the letters. It's like I
Mm,
found that to be interesting. And the propaganda one, I like that definition that he gives about how it tries to basically bypass your thinking process and kind of goes into like that emotional. It's not whether it's good or bad. It's the fact that what's happening is that you're not being asked to think about it. You're being asked to like accept something like emphatically and emotionally. And this is a black or white issue. Like don't think any
mm.
further. So I do like those two for that reason. And I'm looking forward to getting into the semantic environment later on and hearing how that relates to what you were saying about Heidegger and stuff like that. Because I think that'll be an interesting kind of comparison to make. I mean,
Yeah,
I
man.
don't know what Postman would feel about the whole Heidegger thing. I think I think in one of his books he mentioned something about he doesn't like Heidegger because of the whole
Right.
Nazi thing, but whatever, that is a thing. But I doubt Postman would be like, don't ask questions about it. So
Yeah, that's a
who
great
knows?
reason to not like a person. Uh, Not a great reason to neglect the
Hmm.
most important philosopher of the 20th century. Um,
Right.
but also, Postman being able to do so much while bracketing out the thinkers I take most seriously, being Marx and Heidegger, probably, um, is a benefit in a sort of sense for me. He's because then I get to bring them in to dialogue with him. You know what I mean? So it's like he didn't have to. He's still really great. He got enough from McLuhan and Mumford
Yeah.
and Lul to be able to do a lot, a whole hell of a lot.
Yeah. I'll send you an article later that was written by someone in the media ecology world that it doesn't talk. I don't remember if he talks about Heidegger directly, but he does talk about Sloterdijk's globes or bubbles or
Oh
whatever it's
yeah,
called.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And Neil Postman closely there too. So there
Oh,
might be something
sick.
interesting
The
in there.
Spheres
So I'll
trilogy.
send it your
Yeah,
way.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the
yeah, yeah.
spheres. There you go. There you go. I'll send it your way because Neil Postman is all over that thing. So
Young Anarch says, I think sloganeering has to do with the mimetic aspect of communication. This entails the shortening of communication that was highlighted, and the shortest phrases are the most powerful. Yeah, and if all we care about is the cyberneticity of communication, then that's all there is in a sort of sense. And so it's that's how to get the most bang for your buck. But if you care about reclaiming your mind from all of that, you need this. And so, on that needing this note, I wanted to ask you, David, what you think about his idea that this would be taught in the future. Like he was saying that this would be a part of education. He says, at least on the level of, I don't know, some niche literary, what he said, Renaissance period or something like that. Or he was saying that this should be taught. Like this should be a subject that's at least an elective at the college level. But I would think this as a subject matter, not just taught at the level of like maybe the priority of public speaking itself. It should probably be a core curriculum for high schoolers at minimum.
oh yeah, absolutely. I think he would agree with that last statement even more so. I mean he has said that he wanted media ecology basically to be a replacement for English itself. So like just not do away with English, but basically just make it this one subject. And I mean, he wrote right before this book came out, he had written 6 textbooks that were for 7th through 12th grade, and it was basically him, like, putting his money where
Mm-hmm.
his mouth is and basically writing the textbooks to do such a thing. I have a few of them around that I tried to pick up. They're a little hard to get. They're a little hard to buy because they're not um they're just textbooks. I don't know if they were ever even sold in bookstores. But yeah, I think he'd agree with that. It's and I agree with that. I think it's important. It's almost like I can't believe how like I it's almost cliche that quote that gets attributed to David Foster Wallace about the fish that are swimming by, and the old fish tells them, "Oh, the water's great today, guys," and they're like, "What's water?" Like I feel like we're still kind of in a situation where we haven't stopped to question like what has changed, what has that's why I like the analogy of just media ecology, of how he makes it that, like, yeah, we live in a natural environment, but we also live in like a technological environment. And I don't think like many of us stop to think about how that changes things. Yeah, we need water and we need food, but we also need to communicate with each other. And what changes when we're no longer face to face with each other? And what changes when now, like, 90% of the communication we have with our loved ones are through these like quick messages that we send through our phone, or there's been almost like a flattening because we'll talk to our loved ones that way, but then we'll also talk to strangers on the internet that way. So it's almost like we don't ask those questions. We don't think about, what do those changes kind of mean? And it seems like we still haven't, even all these years. So I think I still think Neil Postman was right about let's replace English already, and just,
Straight up.
incorporate
Straight
media ecology into this.
straight the fuck up. Yeah, no, for real. Like this is serious, seriously important, and I think it's going to be a really big part of the next 25 years for me. Is basically being like, okay, what would the core curriculum look like for 21st century education, and what would that media ecology syllabus look like? How many years
Hmm.
would it be? How many levels would go into it? Would it start with primary texts, or would you see? I don't like textbooks, right? I don't really like textbooks at all. So would you do some kind of hands-on learning about it that teaches certain principles about it, right? Get kids to start
Yeah.
thinking about the difference between form and content, start thinking about the different messages of different mediums, have them start dissecting slogans, problematizing them. At what point do they actually start reading McLuhan and Postman, right? Like those kinds of questions are huge. And that's the kind of stuff that we'll be looking at, or at least start setting ourselves up for at the retreat. But I also wanted to touch on the
Nice.
thing you said about landmines, because you're bringing up the dog whistles thing. And really, when you call it a landmine, it's also what people in the theory world will often refer to as shibboleths. Are you familiar with that, with those ones?
Shibboleths.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
I am curious what the actual technical definition of it is, though. I know the historical, like where it comes from, but let's go ahead and just look at a Google defi- defin, def, definition. I almost said defamation. The shibboleth.
Shibboleth.
A custom,
Shibboleth.
principle, or belief distinguishing a particular class or group of people, especially a long-standing one regarded as outmoded or no longer important. And
Mm.
so the shibboleth, history of the shibboleth as a concept, where does it come from historically? I'm asking Grok because it can probably do a good job. Because I normally just say, oh, there was this one country at war with this other one, and then there were these people in the internal population who did not ethnically look different, but culturally there was something different, and they were being persecuted. And the way that you could tell was with how they pronounced this word. So let's just see if Grok gets at that. It says the concept of a shibboleth originates. Here, I'll actually show it on the screen here. Let's see. Can I make it? You won't be able to see it, but they will. The concept of a shibboleth originates from a biblical story in the book of Judges, chapter 12, verses 5 through 6. In the Hebrew Bible, around the 12th century BCE, the word shibboleth itself comes from the Hebrew term meaning ear of grain or stream. In the story, the Gileadites used it as a password to identify and kill fleeing Ephraimites after a battle. The Ephraimites mispronounced the word as shibboleth due to a regional dialect difference, revealing their identity and leading to their slaughter. About 42,000 were killed. This event established the shibboleth as a linguistic test to distinguish insiders from outsiders based on pronunciation of cultural markers. Over time, the term evolved to describe any word, phrase, or custom that identifies group membership or exposes outsiders, often in contexts of conflict or social division. Historically, shibboleths have been used in various cultures and conflicts. During World War II, Allied forces used English words like lollipop to identify German infiltrators who struggled with certain pronunciations. In the 1692 Battle of Primolano, Italians used Sicara, chickpea, to detect, which is their word for chickpea, to detect French speakers who said Ciscara. In modern, I obviously pronounced that wrong too. In modern times, shibboleths extend beyond language to include cultural practices, jargon, or ideological signals that mark group identity, like specific slang in subcultures or political phrases signaling allegiance. The concept reflects the human tendency to use subtle differences, linguistic, cultural, or behavioral, to enforce group boundaries, often with high stakes. Its enduring use shows how identity and exclusion remain tied to small, seemingly trivial markers. Grok, you did a good job on this one. Yeah, it's amazing. So I imagine that the people who were slaughtered, the Ephraimites who were slaughtered by the Gileadites, I imagine that those Ephraimites had a lisp, right? So like they were lisping, like when it's like, oh, how do you pronounce? They'd say the password, and then they try to say shibboleth, but because they say it with the lisp, they're killed on the spot. Which is a dark origin for a very important term. And so, yeah, there's a lot of these landmines in discourse today. And a lot of people watch left or right media so that they can learn how to avoid certain landmines or pronounce the shibboleths so that they can be in certain cultural spaces. It's a form of cultural capital that they are acquiring, to go with Bourdieu here, right? And so knowing that something is dialectical or anti-dialectical, knowing when or how to say that it is or is not, that kind of thing is something that people who might not even be Marxists are still going to try to understand if they are surrounded by Marxists, in the same way that learning how, when, or why something is intersectional or should be addressed as or treated as intersectional, like what would that mean, or knowing how to work vis-a-vis like a privilege stack at the Democratic Socialists of America or convention or something like that. Like that becomes like this sort of woke thing that people need to learn. But it's also something you get with more mainstream American political discourse. So Kiev or Kiev, were you familiar with this one? Because of the whole Ukraine war. So let's see if Grok can explain it. Let's see. Kiev pronunciation. I want to say, what's the Kiev pronunciation disagreement in America, American culture, getting at, and how is this a shibboleth? All right. So, it's yeah, here we go. The Kiev pronunciation disagreement in American culture centers on the competing transliterations and pronunciation of the Ukrainian capital's name, reflecting deeper geopolitical and cultural tensions. The two main forms are Kiev, derived from the Russian transliteration, and historically dominant in English due to the Soviet Union's influence when Ukraine was under Russian control. This was the standard in American media and discourse through much of the 20th century. And then Kiev, based on the Ukrainian transliteration, it reflects Ukraine's push for linguistic and cultural sovereignty after independence in 1991. The pronunciation approximates the native Ukrainian, emphasizing national identity.
Wow.
Yeah, and so
I never heard of it.
Yeah, both of my dads, so to speak, my own father and then my father-in-law, will say Kiev, And they say that because they're taking the side of Ukraine right now. And I said Kiev one time in my dad's presence, and he was like, it's Kiev. I was like, yeah, I know, but it's like, I said, I know it's like a shibboleth right now, though. And so he goes, well, I tend to use words for places the way that the locals do. And I was like, do you say Paris, France? No, you fucking don't. This is because it's a part of the American culture war right now. Okay. Anyway.
Paris.
Paris. Yeah.
Nice example.
Yeah, come on. Who does that? You don't say, but then I pointed out in that conversation, you do hear Lacanians go, Lacan. Like they're all like, they're like talking like normal Americans. They're all like, yeah, blah, 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 Lacan. And it's like, fuck did you just say? Lacan. Oh, okay. Do you also say Sartre? Come on. And it's like when people say Kierkegaard instead of Kierkegaard, and then people are like, okay, well, come on, but you should what? What's wrong with anglicizing things? This is why I'm fine calling you Ruiz and Ruiz, since you don't mind anyway. I like to alternate between when I know, you know what I mean? And so it's like, same with Nietzsche or Nietzsche or his term ressentiment or resentment. It's just like, guys, we'll never become a literate culture again if we can't get over the bullshit pronunciation thing. It's just, it doesn't matter as much as understanding what the words mean. Like knowing what the words mean, knowing that they have different meanings based on different contexts, knowing that different people use them in different ways, knowing that they are shibboleths or landmines and can function as dog whistles. All of that is more important than actually playing the game and code switching and trying to use it as some kind of cultural capital. At least I think so.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's kind of made things like it almost makes the wall higher to like try to get into these thinkers, because it's like I'm trying to think about, and it's like, oh, that's not even how you say the name. So it's like, Jesus Christ, I have to go back to like how to pronounce the name now. Like I was worried about, damn. So it makes it puts up like, it makes the wall feel like it's higher up. Then it's like, okay, so now I got to focus in on saying the names correct before I focus on the other stuff. So
exactly.
That's just my, yeah.
By the way, I did a little poll on the chat. I don't know if you saw it, David, but it said, I said, were you here for both the Bourdieu and the Postman? And then I made 4 different answers to that poll. First was yes and loved both. Second was yes and preferred the former. Second was yes and preferred the latter. And third was nope, got here recently. 67% of you got here recently. Oh, now 60% of you got here recently. So it's a live poll. We're getting results as this goes. But yeah, most of you just got here pretty recently. But 30% of you have been here the whole time and loved both. So shout out to the 30%. You're the real ones. And welcome to the new folks who just popped in pretty recently. I hope you've gotten something from this. As we covered with Bourdieu here, who I'm going to turn to and use as a connection point to kind of tie together this whole thing. He is all about this approach to pedagogy, to public speaking, to laying out his method that is not necessarily supposed to be taken linear or, in some stair-step fashion, but instead he's trying to say, look, it's going to be useful no matter where you jump in. And that's why he's so good for the age of the internet and for reading on stream, because it doesn't matter when you get in here. You can get a lot from hearing very little, and you don't need to hear everything, though going back over it later will obviously help. But to tie it back to Bourdieu and classification struggles and the idea that there is a problem of calling someone an idiot. Bourdieu is laying the basis for his discourse on classification struggles and how calling someone a word that is insulting is a very philosophically rich sort of problematic, right? It's not just that you are able to say what someone actually is. By calling someone something, you're doing a lot of different things at once. But one of the things that's going on is that the context matters. It's either just your opinion or it's an actual prognosis or proclamation or conviction on the part of an institution, right? You could be representing an institution. You could have the authority to say someone is an idiot. So for instance, if I say someone is schizo-spreading in the chat, is that just my opinion or do I have the legitimate authority to say so? We're in this weird space where we're not really sure, right? Because anybody can start a YouTube channel and then have their opinion. But then again, within the context of this space and the amount of clout I have been able to accrue up until now, my words have a little bit more weight to them than if I had 0 subscribers or only 5, right? So like at the point that I have amassed something and then I say, that's schizo spreading, even if some other creator would go, no, it's not. That person was just doing this other thing that, well, okay, well, at that point, that person is my peer, they're a colleague, are they an equal, who knows? But that's a difference of opinion between people who are working in this space, who've kind of built their own little castles, right? The opinion of the creator is somehow different than the opinion of the participant who happened to just pop in. This is what Bourdieu wants to problematize. We want to think about not just the power imbalances between, say, creator and participant or follower and influencer or whatever the attention economy sort of framing is. It's not just about power imbalance. It is also about the fact that we are in fields that have gravitational forces that shape how we act and how we speak. And that how we act and how we speak, as Postman said, how we speak, as Postman said, can change how we think and act. And that's why he wants to turn to thinking about stupid talk. But using this question of legitimacy or legitimate authority, what is Postman saying at the very beginning? What are his qualifications for why you should take him seriously? It goes so well. It's like a perfect sort of complement with what Bourdieu is getting at the beginning of this stream. Right? He said, I'm going to give you 5 reasons for why you should take seriously what I'm doing here or thinking about what I'm thinking about, right? And he says, the first 3 I take to be not that great, right? The worst of the 3 was that, and the one he got from Wizard of Oz, remember, was that he's gotten awards for talking about this kind of thing. He's basically saying, I don't think that's the best reason. What were the other 2 reasons there, David?
I am a professor of communication. I have written previously, and then the one you mentioned, the awards.
And why are those bad? Like bad reasons for taking him seriously.
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, just off the top of your head. Yeah. Not his reasons, but just why those seem to be bad for you.
Well, just to say his reason, I think it would say because those are forms of stupid talk. And then I think also, just because you have those, just because you're a university professor or have been given awards, a lot of those things don't have too much kind of, I guess, validity these days. A lot of us don't trust those institutions anymore. It's almost like, because if you say you're a university professor to some people, it's just like, just stop talking now because I'm not listening to anything else you have to say. And if you're given an award by an institution that's already, we don't even need to talk about that. Once you reach the point of that, then everything else is pointless.
Yeah, I've never told a regular person in my life that I have a master's degree. I don't even have that on my bio in most places on the internet. I don't think it does what a lot of people think it does, and I don't think it should do what some people think, not just think it does, but it actually has a certain effect on some people, and I don't think it should have that effect, right?
So it's almost related to I told you so, or because I said so, almost.
Right? Yeah, yeah, and so like that is a thing. A lot of people will start talking about something, and the assumption is that you care, and at least that. No, I'll say at least what he does with his 3 stupid versions of why you should care. At least he's giving reasons. and those reasons are definitely better than just because I said, right? So it's like a
Hmm.
lot of
Yeah.
people share their opinion, and the assumption is that of course you care about what they have to say. And I think that there's like this sort of like, well, we're all part of a democracy, so you should have to listen to me because I'm a person,
Hmm.
I'm a part of the demos. Yeah, but okay, so it's not very convincing to say that you taught this at the university, that you have been given awards, or that this is something you've thought about previously. You could find all kinds of people who've been given awards for things. In fact, Nobel Peace Prize winners who suck ass, right? Like you can find all kinds of artists who've been given Emmys, they suck ass, right? So it's like, what does the award really mean anymore? And
Yeah.
that's actually a reflection on the institution having lost legitimacy. People have, and that's what Benjamin Studebaker, in his own way, is getting at with his book on legitimation crises.
Hmm.
But what I want to tie this to, though, is that he says that those are bad reasons. At the same time, he still shared them, which
Hmm.
is a really smart rhetorical move. So it's like these are reasons some people would take very seriously. So he presents them, but then still sort of like even is a by poo-pooing these reasons that are nonetheless true, he's able to kind of sublate them. He's able to go, yeah, I've received rewards for this, and yes, I teach this and all this stuff, but that's not a reason to trust me. And it's like, well, that's actually
Hmm.
more of a reason to trust you is the fact that you have those things, but you also don't stop there. You don't think that's enough. What was his fourth reason again? He spent 15 years doing this?
Yeah, he spent 15 years making systematic observations on how people talk and trying to explain themselves and trying to explain myself why talk so often confounds our purposes. Yeah, so he's been making systematic observations for
Mm-hmm.
15 years.
Yeah, that's a pretty good reason, right? Um,
Hmm.
so we're about to be premiering uh, a video here on the channel. Everybody who's watching this right now live, if you have autoplay on your YouTube, you'll be automatically transferred to the premiere audience chat. But before we close out, what's the fifth example he gave as to why we should? Was it that you said it's about if the book works? It's like a sort of
Right, the
pragmatic,
book itself. Yeah, the book itself. If you
right? So
find the perspective is usable, then it's good. If not, then I've wasted your time.
right. So don't take him seriously because of his credentials. Don't take him seriously just because he spent a lot of time on this. This is good. It's like the Marxian critique of the labor theory of value, right? Is just putting a lot of effort into something doesn't mean it's good, right?
Right,
The labor theory of value at the most simple level, at the more John Locke level says, oh, I put so much labor into this. Oh, so it should be worth way more money. And it's like, yeah, but if you take 3 times as long to mow the lawn than someone else, that doesn't mean it's so much more valuable. I'm not going to pay you three
right.
times as much as someone else just because you took so much longer. And that's a critique of the labor theory of value that actually Matthew Stanley just used in his most recent post. But Marx, and by the way, Matthew, I do have to talk to you about this. Marx was aware of it, and he addresses it in section 4 of chapter 1 of volume 1 of Das Kapital. But anyway, yeah, he's kind of doing that critique right here. Yeah, I spent 15 years doing this. That doesn't mean this book is worth reading. This book is worth reading if you actually find it useful. But if you haven't read it yet, then why would you think it's worth reading? Well, folks, because we're reading it. And if you got even a snippet of it and you find that useful, then it has a kind of authority that Pierre Bourdieu is not thinking about in classification struggles when he's thinking about plain old opinion and on the other side, institutionally validated opinion. What we're talking about is, well, someone's saying something and it's either useful or it's not. And you can find out if it's useful. And if it is useful, let us know. You can do that by liking, subscribing, becoming a patron over at the Patreon. If you want to get more involved, become a subscriber. This is the propaganda part, right? But I think you should. I think you should. And I mean that. So with that, we're going to close this thing out. David, thank you so much, man. This has been awesome.
Thank you. This has been fun. I'm enjoying it.
All right. Take care. Subscribers get access to all past courses at Theory Underground, as well as ongoing courses taught by David McKerracher, Benjamin Studebaker, and Nina Power. Subscribers also get access to monthly research seminars, and the higher tiers of involvement unlock discussions and one-on-one small group tutelage. So if you're like me and you're never a huge bookish kind of person, but somewhere along the way you got really into listening to educational materials, if you got really into listening to podcasts and then books at work, if you love going deep into ideas, but you're just not a traditional bookish kind of person, well, this is where the alliance between people like us and people who are more bookish and specialized are able to meet to work through these things and do so in defense of the human, in defense of our dignity, in defense of our common humanity and our intellectual integrity. This is not a place where we're going to kick you out because you're pro-life or pro-choice, or where you are an atheist or a agnostic or a Christian. But it is a place where you're expected to love one another regardless of such things, and to show up for people in your actual IRL real life communities regardless of such things. And if that is exciting for you, and if you're excited to learn about what this approach, this method, this school of thought has to offer, then I'm excited to meet you. Subscribe today.